Chapter 55. My beloved minister has rendered meritorious service in protecting the emperor. How about I grant you the title of **********. The lady boss's face suddenly became extremely painful. Since you still have the mood to talk nonsense, it seems like there's nothing else. Then I'll go back to sleep. You can slowly experience the thrill of the new realm. With that, the lady boss yawned and then pushed the door open to leave. As for Wang Lu, just like what the lady boss said, he was experiencing the thrill of this breakthrough. The 8th layer of non-phase sword bone, since the birth of the Emperor Bone, was announced to have reached the grand accomplishment stage. More than 200 sword bones with powerful vitality, under the command of the Emperor Bone, released a terrifying energy several times more than before. Although he only broke through one level, the overall improvement of his strength was already difficult to measure. Crack. Wang Lu casually reached out and broke off the corner of the bedside cabinet. The hard wood was crushed into pieces by him. Perhaps this was a matter of course for any cultivator who had reached the grand accomplishment stage, but Wang Lu, who specialized in non-phase sword bone, had never experienced such a powerful increase in strength. Since the beginning of his cultivation, he seemed to have no affinity with the destructive power. This confirmed what his master said. Attack, speed, all were evil. Only hardness was everything. In fact, after reaching the grand accomplishment stage of the 8th layer, the nature of the non-phase sword bone did not change. It was still extremely good at defense and ignored the destructive power. The current increase in strength was just the side effect of the upgrade of the non-phase sword bone, but the side effect was so significant, it was difficult for Wang Lu to estimate the toughness of his body. Perhaps compared to those cultivators with foundation-building cultivation base, his body was not inferior to them. And this was only the grand accomplishment stage of the body refining stage, not even the qi cultivating stage. The non-phase sword bone was an extreme cultivation path. However, to this extent, no matter how picky Wang Lu was, he had to admit that he was convinced. His master, that slut, was able to firmly occupy a seat in the Heavenly Sword Hall because of her uniqueness. According to Wang Lu's situation, even though that guy's cultivation level is a bit low, his defensive ability may not be inferior to those peak nascent soul stage elders. Of course, this was just a guess. The difference between King Pill and nascent soul was far greater than the difference between lower realms. Not to mention that those elders were all at the peak of nascent soul. In theory, if they fought against someone at the peak of King Pill, they would at least be able to fight against 10 people. Although his master's non-phase method was peerless, as a disciple of the Spirit Sword sect, the several elders' unique skill was not necessarily inferior. With the pain-in-the-ass spirit of a professional adventurer, Wang Lu secretly imagined the scene of his master committing a crime, being caught by the 2nd and 3rd elders, and having to pay for her crime with her body. After that, he sighed with emotion that he had been deeply poisoned by the atmosphere of non-phase peak for 2 years, which was already beyond redemption. Now was not the time to fantasize. Mastering the 8th level of the sword bone was gratifying, but the next step was the most crucial one, guiding the qi into his body. According to his master, when he successfully mastered the 8th level of the sword bone, he would understand the secret of the void spirit root and guide the qi into his body. So, what was the difference between now and before? Wang Lu closed his eyes again, put the residual pain in his body to the back of his mind, and once again entered the world of internal vision. When he opened his eyes, Wang Lu suddenly felt enlightened. When he looked around, the sky was actually clear and boundless. Under the golden sunlight, what came into view was a stretch of green water, green mountains, gurgling streams, and fragrant flowers. Witnessing this scene, it took Wang Lu some time to sort out his thoughts. Just like what his master said, once he successfully mastered the 8th level, everything was indeed different. Originally, in this space, although there were mountains and rivers, and there were also more than 200 bright jade pillars that illuminated the 4 directions, but in the distance where the light could not reach, it was oppressively pure darkness. Using the internal vision to inspect was like walking in a bustling night scene. However, now it was as bright as day. Not only the space around him, but even the distance was illuminated by the intense blue light. The 206 sword bones in his body were still emitting light, but they were all covered by an even more intense light source. That was the sun above his head, the emperor bone that was struck down by the lady boss, which had become the key to change everything. The existence of the emperor bone not only meant that there was a dazzling light source in his body, but more importantly, it allowed Wang Lu to see the distant place, the boundary that was propped up by the 206 sword bones. According to what Wang Lu had learned in the sect, that boundary was the most important part of a cultivator's spirit root, an existence similar to a filter. Outside the boundary was the omnipresent spiritual energy of heaven and earth, and inside the boundary was the cultivator's jade mansion. Of course, for Wang Lu, who had just reached the body refining stage, it was still not a jade mansion. It was just a foundation, also known as the inner mansion. The process of a cultivator's cultivation, in the simplest terms, was to absorb the spiritual energy from the outside into the jade mansion and then transform it into their own power. It could be immortal power, magical power, demon power, thousands upon thousands of them, and it varied from person to person. However, the vast majority of cultivators had to go through this process from the outside to the inside. Generally speaking, it was to draw spiritual energy into the body. In this process, the most critical factor was a person's spirit root, which was the existence of that layer of filter. For the vast majority of mortals, the boundary that separated the inside from the outside was like a strict barrier. The spiritual energy was seriously blocked on the outside, and they simply could not absorb enough spiritual energy to transform it into magical power. Thus, they were unable to cultivate. Secondly, it was the so-called 5-element spirit root, also known as pseudo-spirit root. This kind of person's filter was somewhat humane and could accommodate an appropriate amount of spiritual energy into the body. However, during the absorption process, it was completely indiscriminate, resulting in the spiritual energy that entered the body not only being sparse, but also chaotic. Moreover, what was worse was that the composition of the spiritual energy that entered the body was highly random. Different cultivators used different meditation methods to draw spiritual energy into the body at different times and places, and the amount of spiritual energy they obtained would be very different. As a result, when the cultivator carried out the step of transforming spiritual energy into magical power, it would be very difficult to have any efficiency. After that, it was the 4 elements and 3 elements mixed spirit root. Actually, compared to the 5 elements spirit root, their nature was not much different, and it was still a mess. However, in the end, it helped the cultivator to get rid of the 2 wrong answers. After drawing spiritual energy into the body, the difficulty of filtering was much lower. In Wang Lu's words, being taken by 3 people was better than being taken by 5 people, right? Later on, it would be easier for a child to recognize his father. However, when it came to the level of dual-element spirit root, the situation was different. When the cultivator's filter could only accommodate 2 kinds of spiritual energy, even if the composition ratio still had a lot of changes and uncertainty, there were a lot more ways to distinguish them. Moreover, many cultivation methods didn't even need to distinguish the attributes and could naturally transform it into magical power. As a result, the path of cultivation was undoubtedly much smoother, and it was also from this level that the cultivator had the possibility of advancing to Enlightened King Pill. And only Enlightened King Pill had the qualifications to establish a foothold in the cultivation world. Therefore, dual-element spirit roots, and above, were also known as true spirit roots. However, dual-element spirit roots could only be ranked 5th among the many grades. This was because the 2 kinds of spiritual energy could complement each other, and naturally, it was better than mutually restraining or having nothing to do with each other. The 5 elements spirit roots often had many wonderful uses when drawing spiritual energy into the body. Not only would the cultivator's cultivation progress be faster, but the power of the spells they cast would also be stronger. Further up was the compound spirit root. In fact, it was also a dual-element spirit root, but the compound spirit root's filtering of spiritual energy was more stable, and the 2 elements complemented each other. Generally, it would be a 3rd-grade spirit root. As for the single-element spirit root, generally speaking, the worst one would be an earth spirit root. Not only was the filtered spiritual energy relatively pure, but the permeability of the filter was also very strong. Although it was only one of the 5 elements, the efficiency of drawing spiritual energy was several times better than that of a low-grade spirit root. As for the heavenly spirit root, it was theoretically a flawless spirit root. It could naturally extract extremely pure spiritual energy of a single attribute. As long as it was matched with the appropriate mental cultivation method, the speed of cultivation was simply unimaginable. Of course, mental cultivation methods that could be matched with the heavenly spirit root were also rare. Moreover, after the end of days, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth changed, and the heavenly spirit root might not be as popular as it was during the glorious era. Apart from this, there were also mutated spirit roots. In fact, this was a very general classification. All spirit roots that couldn't be categorized as 5-element spirit roots, as well as spirit roots that were mixed with a special ratio of spiritual energy, resulting in abnormal effects, were all classified as mutated spirit roots. The effects of these spirit roots were varied and difficult to describe in a few words. To a certain extent, Wang Lu's void spirit root was also a mutated spirit root. However, because its grade was too high, it was called the heavenly spirit root. But what was the void spirit root? Since there were only 2 cultivators with the void spirit root in history, and their identities were so special, there weren't many records left. Especially the information about the first emperor, which was mostly myths and legends, with very few credible parts. Today, what people knew was only a little bit of information deduced from the historical materials of great ancestor Desheng. For example, the spiritual energy adaptability was too high, so although it was easy to draw spiritual energy, it couldn't be retained. Thus, great ancestor Desheng spent 10 years in the Kunlun immortal world without any success. And now, Wang Lu was fortunate enough to witness the most special spirit root in the 9 regions for tens of thousands of years, the true appearance of the void spirit root. At the end of the 206 sword bones, a transparent membrane quietly propped up the entire structure of the inner mansion. This was the outer wall of the void spirit root, which was as clear and transparent as glass. The so-called void spirit root probably got its name from this. Generally, spirit roots would have very obvious characteristics. For example, the outer wall of the fire element heavenly spirit root was a group of fire clouds that enveloped the entire sky. In addition to the spiritual energy of the fire element, the rest of the spiritual energy would be isolated from the outside. It was also because of this that when the sect leader of Spirit Sword sect roughly observed Wang Lu and Wang Zhong, he actually missed the qualification of Wang Lu. However, it was impossible to make an accurate judgment based on the appearance alone. Therefore, Wang Lu's slightly resuscitation from the internal vision state and put part of his attention on the outside. Multitasking was the most basic requirement for drawing spiritual energy into the body. Part of the cultivator's energy must be sensitive to the outside world's spiritual energy to absorb and capture it. The other part must stay in the inner mansion to timely preserve the spiritual energy that entered the body. Generally speaking, the cultivator would drive the spiritual energy to circulate in the meridians of the body so that the spiritual energy would not be lost. After that, the spiritual energy would be compressed to form a spin. Once the spin was formed, the surrounding spiritual energy would continue to seep into the body under the suction force of the whirlpool. Eventually, like a rolling snowball, the cultivator could use this abundant spiritual energy to build his jade mansion. Once the jade mansion was built, the cultivator would have officially entered the foundation establishment stage. For Wang Lu, what he needed to do now was to draw the surrounding spiritual energy into his body, and then, through the observation process, he would understand the uniqueness of the void spirit root. Although he was not in the Spirit Sword Mountain, the spiritual energy in the Spirit Creek town was still very rich. Wang Lu, who had the heavenly spirit root ability since he was a child, could clearly see this. Then there was the absorption. His master didn't write how to do this step, but presumably it was not because of carelessness, but because she didn't think it was necessary to specifically write it. And Wang Lu naturally understood the method to absorb the spiritual energy with his body. It was very simple, it was to breathe. However, it was different from ordinary breathing. Instead, he had to use the non-phase Sword Emperor bone as the core to mobilize his whole body's qi and blood, trembling and relaxing to form a suction force on the surrounding spiritual energy. Part of this suction force came from the boundless vitality contained in the non-phase Sword Emperor bone, and the other part came from the natural characteristic of the void spirit root. When Wang Lu issued the command to the non-phase Sword Emperor bone, the light in his inner mansion suddenly became more intense. The more than 200 non-phase sword bones began to flicker with the same rhythm, and that layer of transparent membrane also suddenly lit up, following the entire jade mansion. He took a deep breath. In an instant, the freely dissipating spiritual energy around Wang Lu stagnated, and then, with Wang Lu as the center, it crazily surged in.
So fast.
Even though Wang Lu was already prepared, he didn't expect that this one breath would actually attract such a surge of spiritual energy. All the surrounding spiritual energy within a radius of 100 meters seemed to converge in this one breath, forming a stormy sea. Such a situation was extremely dangerous for any cultivator who had just embarked on the road of immortal cultivation. Whether it was the outer wall of the spirit root or the meridians within the body, they had not yet been baptized by the surrounding spiritual energy. If they were suddenly rushed in like this, it was very likely that they would go berserk and explode. The next moment, the huge wave of spiritual energy hit the outer wall. That layer of transparent, clear, and seemingly vulnerable membrane flickered with a platinum brilliance. Under the impact of the spiritual energy, it was as stable as Mount Tai. At the same time, a platinum rain fell in the inner mansion. Wang Lu was stunned for a moment. He realized that this was the highly purified spiritual energy of the void spirit root. It didn't seem to belong to any of the 5 elements, but it looked very powerful. However, without waiting for Wang Lu to look at it, the platinum raindrops evaporated in midair, turned into a thick cloud, and then completely dissipated between heaven and earth. The entire process only took 3 to 5 breaths of time. When Wang Lu reacted, the platinum cloud had already completely dissipated. The outer wall of the spirit root also no longer flickered with brilliance, and the surrounding spiritual energy was no different from before. It was as if that deep breath in the inner mansion had never happened. Completely withdrawing his thoughts back to the inner mansion, Wang Lu pondered for a moment and finally understood the reason. So it was like this was the key reason why the void spirit root could not cultivate. The so-called spiritual energy adaptability was actually a misunderstanding. The truth was that after the spiritual energy of heaven and earth had been purified by the outer wall of the void spirit root, it had condensed into an unidentifiable power. This unknown power could not be restrained by any existing means. The moment it entered the body, it would dissipate. If it wasn't the owner of the void spirit root himself, he would only see a huge amount of spiritual energy gushing out, just like walking through a city gate. To use a more realistic and common analogy, it was like a poor boy meeting his mother-in-law, who had no choice but to helplessly buy a house. Thinking of this, Wang Lu couldn't help but feel happy. This void spirit root was simply the mother-in-law's spiritual root. Only the second generation like Immortal Qin and Great Ancestor Dishing, who hugged the thighs of the immortal world, could subdue it. Losers like me really couldn't hope for it. However, according to his master, this non-phase sword bone had the possibility to go against the heaven and change one's fate, but how could it be changed? His master's note stopped here. Obviously, she didn't expect that Wang Lu's cultivation speed would be so fast. In a little more than a month, he had already completed the 8th layer of non-phase sword bone and reached the doorstep of the qi cultivating stage. What should he do now? One way was to wait for his master to come back, and the other way Wang Lu couldn't help but feel happy. Even that idiot slut could create such a divine skill like non-phase sword bone. How could he, the dignified bookworm, not follow the existing train of thought? In any case, the objective conditions were clear, so he just needed to analyze it. The current situation was that, after the spiritual energy of the void spirit root had been purified by the mother-in-law's spiritual root, it had already transformed into a Ms. Perfect. And if a loser like him wanted to hold hands with her, There was only one way, right? Wang Lu returned to his inner mansion and focused his attention on the 206 indomitable sword bones that pierced the outer wall of the void spirit root. His master designed the non-phase sword bone to look like this. Her intention was actually clear. If he wanted to hold hands with the Miss Perfect, then force himself on her. Chapter 56. If the outer wall of the void spirit root was like a crafty and harsh mother-in-law, then in a situation where one's own condition could never meet the demand, the only feasible way was to make a private commitment, and then cook the rice. That non-phase sword bone that broke through the sky obviously indicated a straightforward, yet effective path. Force yourself on the bow, using the uncooked rice method. This sounded simple, as if it could be understood with a single thought, but it was based on reverse reasoning. For his master, who designed the whole plan, Wang Lu couldn't help but admire her again. Because his master's non-phase sword bone was obviously different from his own. She didn't have the void spirit root, so she didn't need to follow this path. The 206 non-phase sword bones were carefully designed by his master. As his master said, other people's cultivation method was still other people's. Creating one's own cultivation method was the king's way. That being the case, why did she let Wang Lu cultivate the cultivation method that she created? It was very simple, because although the cultivation method that Wang Lu cultivated was called non-phase method, many of the details were tailor-made for him by his master. His master didn't say this, but how could Wang Lu not guess it? Why was it that in the past 2 years, besides running and taking a bath, Wang Lu hadn't been taught a formal cultivation method? Because the formal cultivation method hasn't been designed yet. And why was Wang Lu delayed for 2 years? But he was not anxious and impatient, and was at ease to be a top student. Because he also knew the problem, it was useless to be anxious. Until not long ago, when he vaguely confirmed that his master should have completed the whole set of cultivation method, he began to act. Now, it was time to test the results. Whether his master's painstaking efforts for the past 2 years were effective or not, whether the void spirit root could cultivate, the answer should be revealed. Although it seemed a bit urgent to try to break through now, but there was a naked beauty on the bed shouting for him. Did he have to endure it and go downstairs to buy that umbrella? A real man shouldn't be afraid to raise a child. Eat my shot first. Wang Lu calmed his heart and adjusted the rhythm of his body. Then, under the trembling of the emperor bone, he took a deep breath in his inner mansion.
Buzz.
A buzzing sound echoed in his ears. The heaven and earth spiritual chi within a radius of 100 meters was drawn in by a strong suction force and hit the transparent membrane. Suddenly, a platinum rain fell from the inner mansion. Wang Lu knew that he only had 2 or 3 breaths of time left, so he immediately ordered the sword emperor bone to release even more energy. Even if he had to forcefully pull it, he had to keep the platinum rain in the inner palace. Although the method was a little rough, to deal with the combination of the Miss Perfect and the mother-in-law, forcing himself on them was the correct way. However, after a few breaths, the platinum rain once again evaporated into mist and then disappeared without a trace. Even though the golden jade pillar in the inner mansion was trembling to the point of shattering, it still couldn't stop the other party. Wang Lu was stunned for a moment and shook his head. Of course, he couldn't make her stay if he did that. How could it be effective against the combination of the Miss Perfect and the mother-in-law by simply increasing his strength to inhale? As the saying goes, force yourself on someone, non-phase sword bone move for me. In Wang Lu's mind, a roar broke out, and the sword emperor bone above the inner mansion suddenly burst out an astonishing light. At the same time, the 206 jade pillars rose from the ground, and their sharp tips hit the outer wall of the spiritual root, colliding with the transparent membrane. The first move, force yourself on someone, kill the mother-in-law. Driving the sword emperor bone to fiercely rub against the outer wall of the spiritual root, the corner of Wang Lu's mouth raised into a grin. As a professional adventurer, he could be very cruel when he needed to. This move, probably no ordinary cultivator would dare to try, or even dare to think about it. Using the flesh to destroy the outer wall of the spiritual root was simply courting death. However, Wang Lu dared. Not only did he dare to think about it, he even dared to gamble. because he was very sure that, although his master didn't write it down in the notes, the next step of cultivation was like this, and there was no mistake about it. Based on the tacit understanding between him and her in the past 2 years, their hearts were connected. The battle between the jade pillars and the blue dome of the sky was extremely fierce. The shockwave surged, causing the mountains in the inner mansion to collapse and the rivers to flow in reverse. It was as if the sky was falling and the earth was cracking, and the end of the world was just around the corner. Such a strong impact was reflected in the inner mansion, but outside, at this time, Wang Lu's 7 orifices were overflowing with blood, his meridians were in disorder, and his bones issued a terrifying caw-caw sound. Even though his body had reached the large success realm and his vitality was incomparably exuberant, he still couldn't bear this kind of self-mutilation. In a moment, he was seriously injured. If he continued, in just a few seconds he would die. However, at this time, a critical change occurred on the battlefield. The transparent outer wall seemed to have been worn down and finally gave up resistance, fusing a little bit with the tip of the non-phase sword bone. Success. Wang Lu subconsciously clenched his fist. It was a great success. The so-called kill the mother-in-law was not really to kill her. If she was really dead, then the matter with the girl would be over. And the one who forced himself on the girl was not the girl, but the mother-in-law. The mother-in-law would watch over the girl, but the mother-in-law, would the mother-in-law's mother-in-law jump out? As long as this was done, the mother-in-law would take care of the mother-in-law and the mother-in-law. With Wang Lu's professionalism, how could he make a mistake in such a script? Even if he used his knee to think, he knew that his master absolutely designed it this way. Therefore, although the process was a bit thrilling, the final result proved everything. With the fusion of the non-phase sword bone and the outer wall of the spiritual root, the spiritual energy absorbed from the outside would be filtered into the inner mansion through the fusion of the non-phase sword bone and the outer wall, instead of evaporating after the white golden rain. To put it bluntly, it was actually the same idea as Patriarch Lu He's man-made spirit root. However, the difference was that even the most powerful man-made spirit root in the immortal cultivation world, under the effect of the spiritual root, could not shake the heavenly spirit root, let alone the void spirit root, which was at the top of the spiritual root. However, the non-phase sword bone could do it. This could also be regarded as the counterattack of a loser. After the fusion with the void spirit root, the inner mansion would still absorb a large amount of spiritual energy. Most of it would turn into white golden rain and evaporate, but there was also a considerable part that would directly enter the non-phase sword bone, and after being filtered by the jade pillars, it would flow down to the bottom of the non-phase sword bone as a golden liquid. With Wang Lu's current knowledge, it was not enough to judge the composition of the golden liquid, but presumably, it was an important material for practicing the non-phase method. Since he didn't have the method to practice the non-phase method, he might as well save it for the time being. The 206 jade pillars, although slowly, firmly absorbed the surrounding spiritual energy and then, bit by bit, accumulated the golden liquid. Before long, it formed a small puddle. Even though it couldn't compare to the platinum rain, this was a power that truly belonged to him. Perhaps the platinum rain was very powerful, but since he couldn't use it, it wasn't worth it. If he had to describe it, this was probably the same as a young, immature love he had with a rich and beautiful classmate when he was still ignorant. The only use was that he could show off to his descendants that he once had such a beautiful relationship when his hair turned gray. Or like Mordred, who used an egg roll to draw a card. Of course, if he looked at things in a positive direction, the situation would not be so sour and bleak. Although the flow of the golden liquid was not fast, it was actually liquid energy, which was one level higher than the gaseous state. In theory, only when a cultivator reached the 5th or 6th level of Qi cultivating stage would they be able to use liquid energy. Moreover, they could only liquefy a part of it, unless it was a talented cultivator with heavenly spirit root or earthly spirit root. Secondly, looking at the total amount, the sum of the golden liquid from more than 200 jade pillars was not a small amount. If it was converted according to the ratio of 100 to 1, the absorption speed of 3rd or 4th rank spirit root was about the same. Although it couldn't be compared to those with heavenly spirit root and high-level spirit root, it was still acceptable. Moreover, This sword bone filtration also had another advantage. When it absorbed the spiritual energy, it was equivalent to the non-phase sword bone being tempered. Because the entrance was the fusion of the sword bone and the void spirit root, it was actually equivalent to directly pressing the white golden rain into the sword bone, and after being transformed by the sword bone, the golden liquid flowed out. Of course, looking at it this way, this golden liquid seemed to be the excrement of the sword bone. But in any case, it was his own thing, so he didn't care about it. Then this situation was actually just the beginning. With the continuous improvement of the non-phase sword bone, the synchronization rate with the void spirit root would also increase. When the time came, the absorption efficiency would also increase. In the end, he feared that the white golden rain would be absorbed and filtered by the sword bone, turning into a golden ocean. In any case, as the first step on the road of immortal cultivation, Wang Lu had no regrets. Therefore, with a faint smile on his face, he loudly fell down. Are you really a fool?
Fuck.
The next morning, when he opened his eyes, he saw the lady boss sitting in front of the window with an unhappy expression. She was taking a towel off his forehead, soaking it in the basin of water beside her, and then putting it back. In the middle of the night, is it fun to hide in the room and quietly risk your life to pass the test? Since you asked me to be your protector, then you should let me protect you until the end. Instead, you avoided me at the most critical time. What the hell is going on in your head? Moreover, if you want to pass the test, why didn't you pick a good place? Look, your blood is all over the bedsheet. If other people see it, they would think that I did something to you yesterday. The lady boss grumpily complained, and then cursed, You're really the same as your master, a bastard. At this time, Wang Lu only felt that his mouth was dry and his whole body was in severe pain. But after listening to these words, he still struggled to defend himself. I have more moral than her. Xueqi. The lady boss's hand trembled, and she couldn't help but overturn the basin of water. You're the pot calling the kettle black. Wang Lu happily closed his eyes. One step less. That's still one step less. I really have nothing to say to you too. Wang Lu reluctantly smiled and asked, This injury, how long will it take for it to heal? Will it delay tomorrow's experiential learning? The lady boss said, With your physique, it should be fine by tomorrow morning. In fact, although it looks serious, it's not fatal. Your luck is really good. Moreover, you've cultivated the 8th layer of the sword bone, so your recovery ability has become a lot stronger. That's good. What's good about that? The lady boss suddenly became angry. Do you know how dangerous it was yesterday? When I noticed the abnormality, you were only a hair's breadth away from a fatal wound. I don't have any life-saving medicine here, so I may not be able to send you back to the mountain in time to find someone to save your life. Don't you always boast that you're a professional adventurer? An adventurer without a life is just a pile of dead meat. Do you know that? Actually, yesterday's situation was completely under control. What control? Being rebuked by Wang Lu, the lady boss became even angrier. She simply ignored the other party's injured status and punched him in the chest. Her strength was so exquisite that Wang Lu wanted to vomit blood, but he couldn't. These past 2 years in the Spirit Sword Mountain have been smooth. Do you really think that you're the heaven's favored one, omnipotent? There are at least 100 people like you who die every year in the 9 regions. Wang Lu continued to struggle to defend himself. Considering the vast territory of the 9 regions and the large population, the mortality rate is actually… Shut up. The lady boss was really angry. Do you think risking your life is fun? Do you think that the greater the risk, the greater the reward? Only the second half of the sentence is effective to you, right? Do you think that as long as you're a genius, you can face any difficulty without any mishap? Let me tell you, in the golden generation of the Lingjian school, none of the top people are inferior to you. Later on, the Heavenly Sword Hall at that time was hot-headed and launched a management trainee program. They sent their best 100 disciples to the savage land to open up a colony. Guess what happened? The lady boss's barrage of questions made it difficult for Wang Lu to respond. Especially the management trainee program, which was a taboo topic in the sect. Even his master, who was a lawless character, once this topic was mentioned, would immediately turn gloomy and become silent. It was like a scar that was engraved on all the elders of Spirit Sword Sect, which could not be healed even after 100 years. Wang Lu was curious about this, but he also knew that this was not a good time to speak, so he patiently listened. The lady boss was not asking him a question, but a rhetorical question. Soon, she revealed the answer herself. The result is, out of the 100 talented disciples, only these 10 people of Heavenly Sword Hall are left. Guess what is the status of these 10 people in the past? When it came to this, even if Wang Lu thought with his knees, he already knew the answer. And sure enough, even the most talented one, Feng Yin, was only above average among the 100 people, far from the top few. As for Lu Xian, Zhou Ming, and the others, not to mention them, Wang Lu was inexplicably surprised. According to your ranking, doesn't that mean my talent is far above the current sect leader?
Ha ha ha, that's really gratifying.
**Seek. That's not the point, okay? The lady boss gritted her teeth and rubbed her fists, eager to smash Wang Lu's head. I know. Wang Lu finally sighed. I'm really sorry for making you worry about me. The lady boss didn't expect Wang Lu to admit defeat so quickly. Hearing his apology, she was caught unprepared. Stunned, she said. Well, there's nothing to be sorry about. I'm not particularly worried about you. I just think, while at a loss, the lady boss's face also changed. However, before Wang Lu had the time to observe, she picked up the basin. Forget it, I don't want to talk nonsense with you. I'm going to open the door to do my business. TSK, are you going to open your daily turnover of more than 10,000 again? None of your business. Go and heal your injury. Chapter 57. The 8th layer of the non-phase sword bone was marvelous beyond words. Early the next morning, Wang Lu's injury was completely healed. Then, under the horrified and indignant gaze of the lady boss, he forcefully ate Thien's 3 days' worth of food, causing a heavy loss. Of course, for someone with an average daily turnover of more than 10,000, this was nothing. Therefore, the lady boss had no choice but to swallow her pride and accept it. After a breakfast that was enough to make Wen Bao feel ashamed and indignant, Wang Lu patted his still flat abdomen and stretched his muscles and bones. He faintly felt that although the 8th layer of the non-phase sword bone had a higher recovery ability, it seemed to come at a great price. Since his injury was healed, there was no need to change the original plan. Inside the Spirit Sword Mountain, outside the Clear Sky Peak, Wang Lu looked at his 2 teammates who had arrived on time and asked, So, we're all here. Do we still need to take attendance? The lady boss was very impatient. There are only 3 people who don't know each other. Are you crazy? Why do you need to take attendance? Wang Lu said with a smile. Well, the main problem is this. With that, he took out a golden document from his bosom. This is the entrance permit issued by the Heavenly Policy Hall. You also know that the Clear Sky Peak is the sect's most important resource. Even I, a successor disciple, can't freely enter and exit, let alone people outside the mountain. Therefore, 2 days ago, I specifically found this document for you, but it needs to be written with the user's name, Speaking to this, Wang Lu stopped talking. After all, they had known each other for 2 years and 3 months, but he didn't even know the other's full name. This friend was too much. However, he couldn't blame Wang Lu. The identity of the lady boss was a taboo in the Lingjian school, so Wang Lu didn't deliberately inquire about it. Most of the time, they only got along with each other in 2 or 3 people, so they rarely directly called each other by name. When they called her, it was mostly, lady boss, shop owner, waiter, beauty, what the hell, you dare to hit me, you wild monkey. The only thing he knew was that his master, Wang Wu, called her Little Ling Heir. There were so many characters in her name, but as for her surname, he couldn't just give her his surname just because she was familiar with him, right? Wang Xiaoling? **CK me. What's with this damn counterfeit smell? Therefore, when there was a rare opportunity, Wang Lu wanted to use this pass to trick her into revealing her real name. By the way, beauty, there's a problem here. You need to sign your real name on the permit for it to take effect. This is a sincerity paper, so Wang Lu's probing could be said to be unscrupulous. In any case, considering the lady boss's level of IQ development and the thickness of her nerves, she should not be able to detect it. However, the lady boss looked at the golden paper and shrugged indifferently. Then help me write Ling. Wang Lu frowned. Just the word Ling? What about your surname? Sorry, there were many mistakes in the past. In fact, it is the bell beside the golden character. Please take this as the standard. Thank you. The lady boss sneered. I don't have a surname. Awesome, right? Impressive, but are you sure this is your real name? If you ruin this piece of paper, it'll be useless. I won't be able to find a second one in a short time. Don't worry. I'm different from your master. I won't cheat you. Wang Lu had no choice but to write a single character Ling on it. However, no matter how he looked at it, he felt awkward. This name without a surname really didn't look like a person from a civilized society. It was more like a pet like De Huang or Ah Mao. Speaking of which, was it okay for the lady boss to be so realistic? She didn't want this precious sincerity paper to be useless. With a trace of uncertainty, Wang Lu filled in the sincerity paper and handed it to the lady boss. He thought to himself that this could be considered as a dog tag. Then the lady boss took the dog tag or sincerity paper without looking at it, put it in her bosom, and strode forward. Outside the blue sky peak, there was a prohibition jointly set up by the elders of the Heavenly Sword Hall. Without a specific document, no one could pass. Even the elders themselves were no exception. Otherwise, the fifth elder wouldn't have had to go through so much trouble to enter the mountain to plunder. Following behind the lady boss, Wang Lu watched her casually pass through the prohibition of the blue sky peak. Inwardly, he couldn't help but be startled. Oh my god, lady boss, are you really a single character? This kind of pet naming really doesn't match your peerless master identity. You might as well just follow my surname and be called Wang Xiaoling. Following behind little Ling Er, Wang Lu was the second to enter the mountain. It was just that, when he passed through the prohibition, he vaguely felt something strange. Is it an illusion? It's like I'm being watched. After successfully drawing the spiritual energy into his body, due to his excellent spirit root, Wang Lu was exceptionally sensitive to the change in the surrounding spiritual energy. He couldn't help but look up, but all he saw was the clear sky. How could he see the truth through the hole in the sky? In the sky above the Spirit Sword Mountain, 3 elderly cultivators were standing on a cloud, looking at the far east. And in the east, a green cloud that seemed slow but was actually fast was rapidly approaching. Looking at the distant cloud, the leading cultivator slowly nodded. 7th Junior Brother, after 3 years on this long journey, the harvest is quite plentiful. The cultivator on the right also praised, not bad. Just this simple flying cloud technique has already shown the aura of a grandmaster. Presumably, at this time, his 7-colored yuanying has already reached the peak yuanying stage. The leading cultivator said, with 7th Junior Brother's talent and perception, if it was 100 years ago, I'm afraid no one could have predicted that he would have today's achievement. The cultivator on the right said, 100 years ago? I still remember that at that time, someone said that even if he was imparted with the help of ***, he would only reach the king pill and would never reach the yuanying stage. But, at that time, who could have predicted today's situation? The cultivator on the left laughed. 100 years ago, except for sect leader Senior Brother, none of us were favored by anyone. It's just that, when it came to the past, the 3 of them had endless emotions. However, before long, the green cloud had already approached the Spirit Sword Mountain. After slightly touching the cloud and mist great array that guarded the mountain gate, the green cloud and mist great array merged together. The green cloud dissipated, and a tall and burly cultivator in a black robe, whose face was hidden in the hood, stepped on the void and arrived in front of the 3 people. Although his appearance seemed a bit mysterious, when he opened his mouth, he let out a straightforward and heroic laugh. Sect leader Senior Brother Lu Xian, Senior Brother Fong. It's actually the three of you waiting for me here. It's really a shame. Seeing him, Lu Xian's face couldn't help but burst into a smile. If it weren't for fourth junior brother and sixth junior brother going out, we would have come together. Ninth junior sister is preparing a welcoming banquet for you. Rest assured, according to your request, it's not too grand. But martial brothers and sisters always have to get together. Even the always simple and upright disciplinary elder Fang He, with a gentle face, said, "Yes, junior brother has been wandering the world for 3 years, going to the western continent and the eastern border. Presumably, you've gained a lot, so you must tell us about it." After exchanging a few words of greeting, the several martial brothers didn't hurry to enter the mountain. Instead, they stopped in midair and talked. Some words could only be passed between the few of them here. Sect leader Feng Yin Daoist master earnestly asked, "Seventh junior brother, this time, when you went to the western continent, did you find your family?" The seventh elder shook his head. "There's no clue at all, but I'm already mentally prepared, so it's nothing. After all, it's very difficult for a small tribe like that to survive for more than 50 years, and I've been away from my hometown for more than 150 years. But this time when I went back, I still saw a lot of my people. Speaking to this point, the seventh elder stopped. After a while, with some regret and some sadness, he said, "Their living conditions are very bad. No matter where I go, what I see is almost the same: poverty, ignorance, panic. Although in this kind of hardship, some heroes will be born, but without good luck, no matter how talented they are, they still can't grow up. Not everyone can be like me, lucky enough to meet Master, lucky enough to meet several martial brothers. I try to help them, but the strength of one person is really insignificant. At most, I can only help them avoid some natural and man-made disasters, or give them 1 or 2 years of harvest to fill their stomachs. These are just small tricks that treat the symptoms but not the root cause. Even so, many times, people still call me a prophet, a savior. I really can't shoulder such a heavy burden." Hearing this heavy topic, the mood of the several martial brothers was somewhat depressed. How many helpless things were there in the world? Every time they went down the mountain to wander, they would more or less encounter regrets. Even if they were peak Yuanying stage old monsters, how could everything go according to their wishes? In the midst of the depressing atmosphere, the second elder, Lu Xian, suddenly sighed and shook his head. He took out a miniature bonsai from his sleeve and said to the seventh elder, "Junior brother, since you have returned, I will return the Clear Sky Peak's forbidden technique to you." The seventh elder received the bonsai and also put down the heavy burden in his heart. He smiled and said, "Thank you, senior brother, for helping me look after the Clear Sky Peak for 3 years. Later, I will treat you to a drink." Lu Xian angrily said, "Speaking of this, I am ashamed. Junior brother, you entrusted the Clear Sky Peak to me, but I couldn't take care of it. How could I have the face to drink your wine?" Fifth senior sister's matter? It's not a big deal. In any case, it's just picking some fruits in the small Clear Sky Peak. Senior brother doesn't need to worry about it. While he was talking, the bonsai in the seventh elder's hand suddenly shook. This Clear Sky Peak master gawked. "Hey, someone broke the Clear Sky Peak's forbidden technique?" Thereupon, his eyes moved down to overlook the ground. In a split second, a panoramic view of the 12 peaks of the Spirit Sword sect could be seen, including the 3 people in front of the Clear Sky Peak. After seeing the 3 people, the seventh elder was even more surprised. Littling heir? What, littling heirs? This time, even the sect leader was alarmed. He hurriedly looked down and frowned. What's wrong with this child? She's simply messing around. The seventh elder gawked. Senior brother, why do you say that? I'm just curious why littling heir would come to the mountain. Moreover, she came to my Clear Sky Peak. She didn't do anything. She just broke my forbidden technique, but she can restore it in an instant. Fomin Daoist master shook his head. Of course, littling heir can't do anything by herself, but look at the people around her. Humph, that brat Wang Lu is really smart. He actually pulled littling heir to do this kind of shady business. The seventh elder was even more baffled. Wang Lu? Is he the peerless genius that senior brother mentioned in your letter? What's wrong with him? What's shady business? Your clear sky peak has been ruined by him. Ha, you see, not only did he pick the red refined fruit, he also didn't let the wailing ghost vine go. He's simply a robber. The seventh elder looked down at the three people who had just entered the mountain. They were still behaving themselves. He then looked at his indignant senior brother and thought, how come I didn't see anything? Fong, he explained, junior brother, you might not know this, but after practicing the stellar diffraction technique for so many years, senior brother's spirit eyes have become more and more brilliant. It's just that, before reaching the great success stage, there will inevitably be some side effects. The seventh elder wondered, side effects are? Fong, he pointed at the pair of glasses that Feng Yin was holding. If you don't wear the Kunlun mirror, the world in senior brother's eyes will be full of all kinds of possibilities, the illusion of probability. In other words, what he sees is not the present, but the future. But there are too many possibilities in the future, and he can't be sure which one it is, so. Lu Xian sighed. To put it bluntly, maybe you are standing here, but in senior brother's eyes, there's a row of seventh junior brothers. Moreover, he is also discussing all kinds of topics with him in all kinds of ways. So even though Littling Air and the others have just entered the mountain, senior brother can already see what might happen after entering the mountain. Why do you want to practice this kind of evil cultivation method? Evil? Junior brother, think about it carefully. If this cultivation method reaches the great success stage, and senior brother can see the future with absolute accuracy, what will happen? When others fight with him, before they even make a move, he has already thought of a countermeasure. How can he fight like this? And if it is combined with the stellar diffraction technique, the effect of this foresight ability will be even more terrifying. For example, if the other party uses a spell that has never been heard of, even if you know in advance, you won't know how to deal with it. But senior brother can use the stellar diffraction technique and stellar spiritual eyes to simulate and calculate countless plans in his mind, and then use his foresight ability to test them one by one and choose the most effective one. Hearing this, the seventh elder was incomparably shocked. Isn't this invincible in the world? Even if the legendary true immortals descended to the world, they still wouldn't be able to do anything to the omniscient and omnipotent senior brother, right? Feng Yin himself sighed. How can it be so easy to reach the great success stage? I have cultivated this cultivation method for 10 years, but I can't even be considered to have reached the minor success stage. In the end, I don't have the talent in this area, so I have to work twice for half the results. The reason why I cultivate this cultivation method is actually because of Yaob Air. Her aptitude is unparalleled in the world, and she is a good material for cultivating this cultivation method. Hearing this, Lu Xian couldn't help but laugh. Senior brother, you are boasting again. Although Yaob Air's aptitude is extraordinary, compared to Brilliant Peak's little Luli, it doesn't seem to be much better. Not to mention, as long as one's aptitude is above the 3rd grade, the real deciding factor is not the spirit root, but the opportunity. Moreover, even if you only look at the spirit root, with Wang Lu's void spirit root, your family's Yao heir may not necessarily be number 1 in the world. Just now, I saw that Wang Lu has already successfully passed the stage of drawing spiritual energy into his body. With his void spirit root's aptitude, his future is really limitless. Feng Yin snorted. Following such a master, I'm afraid that his lower limit is limitless. Damn, he actually broke through the minor and minor clear sky realms. While Feng Yin Daoist master was making a fuss about nothing, Wang Lu and the other two were still slowly walking on the path into the mountain. Chapter 58. Wang Lu, Littling Air, and Wen Bao entered the small clear sky peak and then went straight to the Azure Dragon Gorge without any reluctance. Because of the last experiential learning challenge, they had obtained almost all the challenge points that they could get. The challenge points were not counted repeatedly, so even if they opened the unparalleled mode again, it would be meaningless. Not to mention, with a lady boss's peerless external help, it was simply impossible to get challenge points. Therefore, The purpose of this trip was very clear. The first was to consolidate his cultivation through actual combat. With the completion of the 8th layer of sword bone and the success of drawing spiritual energy into his body, Wang Lu had already stood on a brand new level. However, before he could continue, he had to further consolidate his foundation. The best way to consolidate his foundation was through actual combat, and the best opponent for actual combat was the large number of third-rank monsters in the Azure Dragon Gorge. Only this level of opponent could really give Wang Lu some experiential learning. Secondly, there were several precious spirit herbs in the Azure Dragon Gorge. Among them, the red refined fruit was a must-pick, as well as golden thread grass, bitter ghost vine, flesh lingji. If he could pick them, Wang Lu didn't want to miss them. Perhaps the herbs in the small clear sky peak were not that valuable in the eyes of peak Yuanying stage elders, but for the master and disciple who were accustomed to hardship on the non-phase peak, it was a huge sum of money that could not be missed. Along the way, there was no surprise nor danger. After only half a day, the Azure Dragon Gorge was already in front of him. The lady boss was a bit surprised. You too, the small clear sky peak is a big challenge for the young disciples of a Lingjian school, but you two don't seem to be struggling at all. Especially you, dead fatty, I didn't know you could run so well. Wen Bao gasped for breath and smiled wryly. Of course I can run. The last time he challenged his senior brother, he survived for a week in the Azure Dragon Gorge. In the last 2 days, he simply ran. Although he didn't lose a few pounds of fat, his physical strength had greatly improved. Wang Lu indifferently said, "This is the 3rd time. It's not strange to walk a bit faster." However, after entering the Azure Dragon Gorge, the road is not so easy to walk, so I still have to count on Sister Ling's help. As he said this, he bowed to the lady boss seriously. Little Ling wrinkled her nose uncomfortably. I always feel that you don't have any good intentions. Also, don't expect too much from me. I'm just a martial artist in the mortal world. I can't compare to your master, who is a Taoist master king pill. It's impossible for me to bring you around here. Sister Ling is too humble. You can think whatever you want, but if you really encounter danger, don't just rely on me to save you. Otherwise, I can only offer you some incense at most. As they spoke, the 3 of them stepped into the Azure Dragon Gorge. As soon as they entered the gorge, a gloomy aura enveloped their surroundings. Little Ling shook her head and said, "What's going on? Why is there such a strong hostility? It's as if I'm the target of everyone." Logically speaking, the monsters in the Azure Dragon Gorge are all nerds. As long as we don't invade their territory, they won't be very aggressive. Wang Lu chuckled and said, "Maybe it's because they're in heat, so they're more violent." But in his heart, he thought, "That's because you don't know that more than a week ago, in order to earn challenge points, Wen Bao and I put laxatives upstream of an important water source in the Azure Dragon Gorge and cheated the achievement of 10,000 Beast Stampede. We earned more than 500 challenge points and successfully angered a large number of monsters." Little Ling didn't pursue the matter further. "Forget it. Since I've accompanied you here, I don't expect this road to be easy. You lead the way in front, and I'll look after you from the back. Fatty at the back, you should also pay attention. Since Wang Lu has brought you along, please do your best." Wen Bao held the dark steel heavy sword in his arms, which had obviously become thicker after being strengthened and forged, and nodded vigorously. Then, Wang Lu led the way and went deeper into the gorge along the entrance. However, when they were only halfway there, a strong aura of monsters appeared on the mountain rocks above them. This smell, is it Little Thunder? Wang Lu raised his head. Sure enough, between the mountain walls, a 2-meter-long golden ferocious beast was baring its teeth at him. More than a month ago, Little Thunder, which had been living leisurely in the Azure Dragon Gorge, was broken into its home by a pair of cruel master and disciple. They took away the spirit herbs it used to decorate its cave, broke its 2 legs, and broke its thunder magic. 2 weeks ago, that damned disciple, who took the side of the evildoer, violently broke into its home again with a fatty, took away the remaining spirit herbs, and seriously injured it. Fortunately, a few days ago, a thunderstorm completely healed its injuries. Now that it smelled its enemy, it immediately rushed to the gorge to take revenge. The strength of that villain was not strong. Although it was seriously injured last time, it could have bitten him to death. Unfortunately, the other party used a crafty plot and smeared a strong poison on its body that it had never seen before. That was why it failed on the verge of success. This time, it would not give him a chance to carry out his plot, and it would directly kill him with thunder magic. Little Thunder opened its mouth, and a spear-like thunder light directly pierced towards Wang Lu's throat. It was so fast that no one could react. However, Wang Lu seemed to have predicted it. The moment he saw Little Thunder, he raised his right hand in front of him to block it. His movement was even faster than Little Thunder's mouth. The next moment, the thunder light pierced through, but it was completely blocked by Wang Lu's right hand. The thunder light splashed, and countless tiny electric snakes struggled to disperse in the air. It only left a little scorch mark on Wang Lu's palm, but after a while, even the scorch mark disappeared. Little Thunder was immediately startled by this magical right hand. Although it was only a tentative attack, the lightning just now was enough to kill a middle-grade rank 2 monster. Even a high-grade stone-wood ape with a powerful defense couldn't block the lightning so easily. It had only been a week since they last met. How could this human have changed so much? Unfortunately, although Little Thunder was cunning, it was not a monster that was good at thinking. Its doubts were soon drowned out by anger. The little thing opened its mouth wide and accumulated even more energy. Its innate superpower quickly created countless electric snakes. Even if it was dozens of meters away, it could still make people's skin tingle. The destructive power was not proportional to its size. This was one of the 2 trump cards of a small monster, like Little Thunder in the Azure Dragon Gorge. As for the other card, just as the Little Thunder was about to charge up its energy and burst out an unprecedentedly intense lightning, this little thing's strong and powerful legs fiercely kicked the ground and flew into the air. The next moment, a thick lightning fell from the sky, and just like a divine tribulation, it covered Wang Lu. This was its second trump card, the change of direction attack. Although it was simply combined with the astonishing explosive power of its hind legs, the actual combat effect was very good. Many monsters, and even the cultivators of Spirit Sword sect who came to the mountain for experiential learning, would be caught off guard and injured by this thunderbolt attack. "Senior brother, be careful." The fatty's exclamation came a bit late. When he tried to warn his senior brother, Little Thunder's thunder beam had already pierced through the air, causing gravel to fly everywhere and dust to fly everywhere. However, the fatty clearly saw that Wang Lu was right in the middle of the lightning pillar, hitting him head-on. "Senior brother?" The fatty was simply scared out of his wits. That thunder strike just now was not worse than the thunder palm strike of the several low-level foundation establishment senior brothers. Senior brother Wang Lu had just started cultivating qi, so no matter how strong his body was, it was still limited. Moreover, he was caught off guard, so how could he block it? "Senior brother. Oh, senior brother, you're too careless. No matter how much your cultivation base has advanced, you're still in the qi cultivating stage. In the Azure Dragon Gorge, you must be careful. As a professional adventurer, you've reminded others countless times, but how could you be so careless when it's your turn? As for the indifferent lady boss, what kind of bodyguard are you? You actually let Wang Lu be in danger? Moreover, you even have a smile on your face. What's so funny?" At the same time, Little Thunder had already used its 2 trump cards. When it landed, it was already somewhat out of breath. However, seeing the dust flying behind it, it proudly wagged its tail. Let alone a qi cultivating stage cultivator, even a low-level foundation establishment stage cultivator would be seriously injured if they were not careful. At this time, the enemy had probably been smashed into pieces. However, when the dust settled, a horrifying scene came into Little Thunder's eyes. Wang Lu's right hand was raised high, and his palm was badly mutilated and charred by the thunder pillar. However, at the same time, his flesh was healing at a speed visible to the naked eye. After a few seconds, The charred skin and rotten flesh fell off by themselves, and new tissue grew back. The thunder strike, which was enough to turn an ordinary level 2 monster into charcoal powder, could only cause such insignificant damage. It couldn't even penetrate his bones. What's worse was that this guy's reaction speed was too fast. He could actually keep up with its rapid change of direction. In fact, Wang Lu certainly couldn't keep up, but for him, he didn't need to. After completing the 8th layer of the sword bone and fusing the jade pillar with the outer wall of the spirit root, he was extremely sensitive to the changes in the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. As a level 3 monster, Little Thunder would make a lot of confusing movements before attacking, such as suddenly baring its teeth, glaring, and shaking its legs to disrupt the opponent's judgment and rhythm. However, no matter how it acted, the spiritual energy whirlpool created by its demonic power wouldn't lie. In Wang Lu's eyes, Little Thunder was like a magician who had been betrayed by a hired shill. It was trying its best to entertain itself, but it didn't know that its underwear had been seen by others. Therefore, it didn't matter if you believed it or not. It was easy for Wang Lu to block this kind of attack. As for the damage caused by the thunder, it was indeed a bit terrifying. It was worthy of being called a low-level 3 monster. If an ordinary Qi cultivating stage cultivator was hit by the thunder pillar, half of their body would be burnt. Even a low-level foundation establishment stage cultivator wouldn't casually resist it. However, for Wang Lu, this damage was only enough to make him slightly frown. It was simply not enough to hurt his muscles and bones. Because this non-phase sword bone had another advantage. In addition to the increase in the defensibility of the copper skin and iron bone, Wang Lu could clearly feel that his body now had a strong resistance to lightning, fire, ice, and other special attribute attacks. In the professional term of an adventurer, it was high resistance. In addition to the substantial increase in his armor and health, the non-phase sword bone's resistance was quite amazing. If Little Thunder used its claws to bite, perhaps it could hurt his muscles and bones. However, its best skill, the thunder strike, was instead restrained by Wang Lu. However, since the super spicy mustard sauce, Little Thunder's fear of biting Wang Lu had already penetrated deep into its bones, so it didn't dare to try it again. Therefore, after hesitating for a moment, this fierce monster decided to retreat first, not wanting to fight with this humanoid freak. On the other side, sensing that the other party wanted to leave, Wang Lu took a step forward, trying to chase after it. Unfortunately, the non-phase sword bone was good, but it didn't have the speed bonus. When Wang Lu took a step forward, Little Thunder had already turned around and ran dozens of meters away. With one kick, it jumped up the mountain, and its figure was about to disappear among the jagged rocks on the cliff. Whether it was Wang Lu or Wen Bao, after running a few steps, they didn't even have the qualification to eat the dust. However, although Wang Lu couldn't stop Little Thunder, there was someone else who could. TSK, wanna run? The girl, who had been silent all this time, suddenly sneered. Her hand shook, and a piece of gravel flew out like a meteor. Like a cultivator's flying sword, it was fast and accurate. It hit right in between Little Thunder's legs. With a crisp sound of chicken flying and eggs being smashed, that lightning monster fell down from the mountain without making a sound. Instant second. It was actually instant second. Although Little Thunder wasn't known for its physical strength, it was still a third-level monster. No matter how weak it was, it still had copper skin and iron bones. An ordinary innate master might not be able to cause any serious damage even with a weapon in their hands, but the lady boss only used a stone to kill it in one blow. Seeing this hidden weapon technique that could instantly kill a level 3 monster, the faces of the two men nearby turned pale. Wen Bao was even more scared, constantly hiding behind Wang Lu. Wang Lu inwardly cursed, "You can hide once, but can you hide forever?" In the face of this shameless female devil, the only countermeasure is to obediently kneel down and lick her. Okay? But then again, he didn't know if there was a special training for the non-phase sword bone later on. Although his master was a female creature, she should also cherish her lower body, right? As the main culprit, the lady boss seemed to be completely unaware of the shocking evil she had just done. She turned around and looked at Wang Lu and Wen Bao. What are you guys doing? Let's go. Looking at the lady boss, Wang Lu suddenly felt how insignificant his so-called diamond body was. Chapter 59. After the lady boss killed Little Thunder with her stone, the three of them continued to move forward. Still led by Wang Lu, their destination was still the depths of the Azure Dragon Gorge. Along the way, they encountered a number of large and small battles. Today, the monsters in the Azure Dragon Gorge became particularly aggressive. They constantly appeared in front of the three people, baring their fangs and brandishing their claws to block their way. This made the lady boss sigh with emotion. Recently, the weather had been abnormal, and the monsters seemed to be in heat earlier than usual. What she didn't know was that more than a week ago, the amount of laxative that Wang Lu and Wen Bao put in the Azure Dragon Pond was too large, which had a bad impact on the ecological environment here. Most of the monsters that appeared were of the third rank, which was similar to Little Thunder, so they didn't pose too much of a threat. Occasionally, there were some that were close to the middle rank. However, although the battle was fierce, with the help of the egg-bursting demon, it was more daunting than dangerous. Through these dozens of large and small battles, Wang Lu's understanding of the non-phase sword bone became more and more profound, and at the same time, he was even more impressed by the vastness and profoundness of this method. It was indeed a top-notch method in terms of adaptability and expansibility. Currently, Wang Lu didn't have the method to cultivate the 9th layer of the non-phase sword bone, nor did he have anyone to guide him on the application of the non-phase sword bone. However, just by exploring it in actual combat, he was able to dig out a lot of tricks. For example, the more than 200 sword bones in his body could be driven by the emperor bone during the battle. Through internal breathing, he could distribute the power and strengthen the individual sword bones. After mastering the skill, if he encountered Little Thunder's lightning strike again, he could still use his hand to block it. If he strengthened the defense of his hand in advance, the damage he received could be further reduced, avoiding the pain of being badly mutilated. In addition, if he encountered some monsters that were good at confusing the mind, he could also use the independence of the Emperor Bone to produce a strong pain at the critical moment, stimulating the body to restore its mind. And if he continued to dig, there would obviously be more wonderful uses, such as stimulating the body to produce a stronger explosive force and so on. There were too many similar skills. Even with Wang Lu's hyperception, he could only initially grasp the outline. Further exploration would take a long time. Even so, as a new cultivator who had just stepped into the Qi cultivating stage, Wang Lu's smooth journey through the Azure Dragon Gorge could be said to be a miracle. In addition to Wang Lu's outstanding performance, the fatty was not just a bystander. Wang Lu brought him into the mountain. On one hand, as the leader, Wang Lu had to lead the team so that the fatty, who was seriously lacking in motivation, could keep up with him. On the other hand, his black iron sword technique was actually very useful. Occasionally, in the Azure Dragon Gorge, they would come across those with huge bodies and thick shells that were difficult to kill. It was Fatty's turn to take action. The black iron sword that was filled with anger slashed down. At the very least, it could cut open a crack. After a week of challenging experience, Wang Lu was not the only one who gained a lot. Wen Bao had also made a breakthrough in the endless challenges. He had reached the upper stage of the 8th stage of Qi refining stage, and his dark steel sword art had reached the 8th stage in one fell swoop. His attack power was not inferior to that of his senior brother, who was at the upper stage of Qi refining stage. It was not easy to kill a Class 3 monster in one blow, but with the help of the characteristics of the black iron sword, it was more than enough to break its defense. And as long as the fatty broke its defense, a certain egg-popping demon, Little Ling Heir's hidden weapon could easily kill any sexually reproducing monster, without any exception. The three-person team cooperated happily all the way, killing with irresistible force. Wen Bao secretly made a calculation and was surprised to find that although this time, they didn't deliberately look for trouble with the monsters, the number of monsters they had killed along the way was actually more than the last time they challenged the experiential learning. Of course, This was inseparable from the addition of a certain egg-popping demon, but the great progress of Wang Lu and Wen Bao could also be seen. The fatty couldn't help but sigh with emotion. If junior sister Yu could see this scene, how great would it be? The reason why he went against his nature and followed Wang Lu to the small clear sky peak to fight for his life, wasn't it, so that he could straighten his back in front of his confidant? But then again, if Yu Xinyao really followed them, with Wen Bao's psychological endurance, he feared that he would be at a loss, and Wanapi, they walked for more than half a day, and when the evening light shone into the Azure Dragon Gorge, the three of them passed through the long and narrow entrance of the gorge and entered an open area, which was the hinterland of the Azure Dragon Gorge. Wang Lu identified the surrounding position and found that after a thunderstorm a few days ago, the nearby terrain had changed a lot. Fortunately, it was not difficult for him, a bookworm. Soon, he identified the path and killed his way to the place where the red refined fruit grew. Speaking of which, the last time he found the red refined fruit in this hinterland, there was too much luck involved. Because according to the records of professional herbology, the red refined fruit would not grow here. The spiritual energy in this area was not rich enough. The few mature red refined fruits in the trees were tantamount to a miracle of life, making people sigh with emotion at the magic of nature. Therefore, according to the old saying in the immortal cultivation world, if you don't take what the heaven gives you, you will be punished. Wang Lu had long regarded the red refined fruit as something in his pocket. The only problem was the golden-lined scarlet snake that was guarding the red refined fruit. More than a week ago, that golden-lined scarlet snake forced Wang Lu, this kind of high-end character, to return with hatred. However, after a week, not only did Wang Lu and Wen Bao's strength greatly improve, there was also a powerful boss in the team. Wang Lu's victory was already in his grasp. Sister Ling, it's that bush in front of us. Inside, there is a golden-lined scarlet snake, a level 3 low-rank golden-lined scarlet snake. With the three of us working together, it won't be difficult to deal with it. Oh, are you sure? Little Ling Air was not as relaxed as Wang Lu. Her pair of delicate eyebrows slightly wrinkled. I don't think it's that easy. Wang Lu was silent for a moment. I can understand Sister Ling's feelings. According to the rhythm of the plot, this place is obviously an old monster, but our team is also a brainless team, right? The boss sighed. I feel that the red refined fruit that grows here is not that easy to pick. But since you are so confident, then open it. Wang Lu was certainly confident, not in his own 8th-layer sword bone, but in the boss's full confidence. Although the old lady had only used one kind of exploding egg technique along the way, Wang Lu still couldn't forget the domineering power she showed when she sent his master, Wang Wu, flying with a single punch. With this kind of god-level character as the leader, what was there to worry about? Therefore, he very generously stepped into the thicket, but just as his feet were about to touch the ground, an unprecedented sense of crisis hit him in the face. The 206 sword bones in his inner mansion all trembled, driving Wang Lu to step sideways and twist his body without any hesitation. He took a twisted posture that would make even jugglers feel ashamed of their inferiority and displayed the amazing dodging ability of the winding step at close range to the extreme. Then, he barely dodged that life-threatening golden light. After withdrawing from the thicket in 3 consecutive steps, Wang Lu's back was already soaked in cold sweat. Just now, when he urgently dodged, he could clearly see that the golden light brushed past him and went straight to a distant mountain wall. The hard rock was cut by the golden light, as if it was cutting through tofu, causing rocks to tumble down. What the hell was that thing? Although it was an old monster but a level 3 monster, was it really that strong? It shouldn't be. More than 2 years ago, during the Immortal Gathering, Wang Lu had encountered a level 3 monster. That western mammoth, which was more than 10 feet long, was a typical low-rank level 3 monster. That kind of vicious beast could easily flatten an army of 100 people and even destroy a town of thousands of people. But now, even if Wang Lu encountered it head-on, he would still be calm and fearless, because that stupid monster's only weapon was its huge body. Even though Wang Lu's strength was less than 1/10,000th of its strength, his copper skin and iron bones were not afraid of it at all. After reaching the 8th layer of sword bone, even that dead fatty's sharp black iron sword could hardly break his defense, not to mention the mammoth's large and inappropriate attack. And among the level 3 monsters, the mammoth was actually quite good at attacking. Most of the level 3 monsters' destructive power couldn't compare to it, but its methods were changeable and hard to guard against. Just now, that invincible golden light had clearly far surpassed the level of a level 3 monster. That kind of invincible golden light was like a flying sword. Not to mention Wang Lu. Even if it was a shoot-on stage cultivator, he would not dare to take it head-on. And just when Wang Lu was surprised, the second golden light came from the thicket. This time, Wang Lu was prepared. Once again, he used the winding step to dodge at the last moment. But, without waiting for him to adjust his balance, the third golden light accurately calculated its landing point and aimed straight at him.
Damn.
There's even a prediction function? And it's even continuous? Wang Lu cursed in his heart. Knowing that he could no longer dodge, he twisted his body in midair, trying to avoid getting hit in his vital organs. At the same time, the sword-bone jade pillar in his inner mansion shone brightly, concentrating all of its energy on his sternum. With his current vitality, as long as his vital organs weren't injured, it didn't matter. On the contrary, the opponent's continuous attacks would definitely not last long, but using his body to taste this abnormal golden light, the risk could be imagined. And at this moment, little Ling Er, who saw that something was wrong, also moved. In an instant, the young girl displayed an astonishing movement technique. With a tap of her foot, she rushed to Wang Lu's side like lightning. Her left hand grabbed his collar and suddenly pulled him back. At the same time, she took another step forward, unexpectedly using her own body to block in front of Wang Lu.
Bang.
The golden light hit the young girl without any hindrance, producing a dull sound. The strong impact contained in the light pushed her away, causing her to fall into a cluster of flowers. At this time, Wang Lu staggered a few steps, regaining his balance. However, when he turned his head, he saw that the young girl was lying in the scattered petals, motionless. In an instant, Wang Lu only felt a buzzing sound in his head, and all of his thoughts were scattered by a strong emotion. In his vision, a mass of blood rose up. In the middle of his forehead, there was a faint golden luster flashing. However, before this strange, violent energy could burst out, a scene that made Wang Lu dumbfounded happened. "TSK, your strength is not small." The young girl in the cluster of flowers suddenly smiled and opened her eyes. Then, as if pulled by an invisible force, she rose from the ground. The next moment, a series of afterimages of the young girl suddenly appeared in front of Wang Lu's eyes. As he suddenly turned his head, he saw that little Ling Er had already stepped back into the cluster of trees. Her slender right hand was ruthlessly pinching the vital part of a golden snake. "I couldn't tell that you are a beast that has cultivated an inner core. With you here, it is no wonder that a strange creature like the red refined fruit can grow here. With your grade, to be able to cultivate an inner core, and even release Dan Qi, it is really not easy. But just now, you almost hurt my friend." The young girl's smile suddenly became ferocious. In the next moment, her slender jade-like hand suddenly tightened. Chapter 60. When she threw away that half-dead golden scarlet refined snake, little Ling Er's face showed a dull expression. She didn't have the sense of accomplishment that a mortal martial artist should have when she instantly killed an inner Dantian monster. However, this showed the demeanor of a peerless expert, right? If she cheered with joy, "Oh, I won," that would be too degrading. Wang Lu sighed with emotion in his heart. This time he really didn't hug the wrong thigh. "Sisterling, as a mortal martial artist, your strength really broke through the sky. Even if the inner Dantian of a snake was only at the initial stage, or even just a pseudo-Dan, its strength was still incomparable to that of an ordinary level 3 monster. Just the aura it emitted had a kind of domineering sword that could break 10,000 methods. Wang Lu's non-phase sword bone could block Little Thunder and Full Moon Roar, but it couldn't block that golden aura. Let alone a Qi cultivating stage cultivator. Even a low-level foundation establishment stage cultivator couldn't block it. But such a strong cultivator couldn't even last one round under Little Ling Air's attack. Then what was Little Ling Air's level? High-level foundation establishment stage? Shudan? No, she was definitely just a mortal. Wang Lu was confident that he wouldn't make a mistake. With his void spirit root, he was very sensitive to the surrounding spiritual energy. Whether Little Ling Air was breathing spiritual energy or not, he could tell at a glance. When a mortal martial artist's cultivation reached the peak, they could theoretically be comparable to a high-level Qi cultivating stage cultivator. Moreover, it was a Qi cultivating stage cultivator from an ancient sect, which was quite a high evaluation. However, Wang Lu believed that even in Lingjian's school, he couldn't find a cultivator who could resist the golden aura of the inner Dantian. Even if he was an invincible tank, in the future, when he reached the high-level Qi cultivating stage, it was still unknown whether or not he could withstand this attack and come out unscathed. Then, what about the lady boss? She found another path at the end of the martial artist's path, and after reaching the Seeing God's invincible stage, she simply broke through the void? There were a lot of questions in his heart, but since she didn't say anything, Wang Lu was too lazy to ask. Unfortunately, even if Wang Lu didn't ask, someone else couldn't help it. What happened just now? I clearly saw. Wang Lu directly kicked him. Damn. When you need to do something, you don't have time to react, but when you don't have to talk, your mouth is quite fast. When Bao was confused, and his heart was filled with fear. What? The lady boss didn't really mind. Forget it. Since he's like that, don't make things difficult for him. With that, the lady boss turned to look at Wen Bao indifferently. No matter how slow the fatty was, he knew what he had to do at this time. Although he was afraid, he gritted his teeth and said, I'm going to the toilet. Then, like a wisp of smoke, he ran to the far corner and looked at Wang Lu and the lady boss with an innocent and bleak face, looking forward to the end of their private conversation. After Wen Bao left, the lady boss looked at Wang Lu with a smile. To tell you the truth, I've been waiting for you to ask. But for 2 years, you actually endured it and didn't open your mouth. Sometimes it really makes me anxious. Actually, I've been waiting for you to ask, but for 2 years, you actually didn't say anything. Sometimes it really makes me anxious. Actually, after you entered the mountain, I wanted to tell you the first time I came to the mountain to find you. And you should have questions in your heart, right? Having said that, Wang Lu bluntly said, Of course I do. Sister Ling, your existence is so special that even that idiot Wen Bao can see that you're different from others, so how could I not notice it? What do you think? The lady boss asked. Wang Lu said, In the beginning, my intuition told me that you should be the illegitimate daughter of the sect master, right? After all, you come to the mountain when you have nothing to do, and you have unimpeded access to all the forbidden areas. Moreover, you have the firmament cloud ancient coin in your hand, so you are definitely the model of an illegitimate daughter. The lady boss didn't answer, but when she heard Wang Lu's straightforward answer, her eyes were obviously a little confused. After a while, she asked, Then what happened? You changed your mind?
Why?
Wang Lu spread out his hands, Because my master calls you Little Ling Heir, and she claims that she has a deep sisterly relationship with you. And not long ago, she kept saying that she wanted to marry you, so I don't think you are an illegitimate daughter. What does it matter? Little Ling Heir was very puzzled. If you are the daughter of the sect master Fengyin, then if Wang Wu is with you, doesn't that mean that she is 1 generation lower than the sect master? She usually despises the sect master, so how could she be willing to be 1 generation lower than the sect master? It is from this point of reasoning that I reach my conclusion. The lady boss was stunned for a while, then shook her head. You are really a smart person, always like to think more than others, but sometimes you are too smart for your own good. In fact, your guess at the beginning was not wrong. I am indeed the sect master's daughter.
What?
Wang Lu was really surprised, and he took a few steps back, looking up and down at the pretty and lively girl in front of him. Sister Ling, to be honest, I really can't tell. The lady boss carelessly stroked the hair in front of her forehead. It's right that you can't tell. After all, you are an illegitimate daughter. As for your bitch of a master, you should have thought about it. Her wishful thinking is that if she can get me, she can openly fight for the inheritance of Lingjian School as a son-in-law.
Puffed.
Wang Lu finally couldn't help but spit out. Even though he had been with his master for 2 years, she was still able to set a new low. But don't blame her. She has her own reasons for being like this, the lady boss said. Seeing that Wang Lu didn't believe her, she was about to defend him out of sisterhood, but then she heard Wang Lu say, Sister Ling, since your identity is so prominent, why don't you be a little princess in the mountain? Why do you have to run at that and in with a daily turnover of more than 10,000 at the foot of the mountain? At the mention of this topic, the lady boss's expression suddenly became cold. Huh? Why do you think so? Wang Lu shrugged. It seems that the relationship between you and your daughter is not good. Is it because of your mother? The lady boss said, No. Actually, I don't have any impression of my mother. As far as I can remember, he brought me to the Spirit Sword sect. I've never seen my mother, and he never mentioned anything about my mother to me. Therefore, unlike what you guessed, the reason why I don't have a good relationship with him is not because of my mother. Oh, then why? I think he is actually quite good to you. Good? Are you sure? The lady boss sneered, the dignified daughter of the head of Lingjian School, but doesn't know how to cultivate and only has a mortal body. Why do you think this is? Wang Lu didn't even think about it. Of course it's because a lowly person like you is not fated to cultivate. As a result, a certain lowly person jumped on the spot. Damn. If you want to talk about lowly people, can I be more lowly than your master Wang Wu? She even has the king pill. Being given such an appropriate example, Wang Lu also felt that his answer was inappropriate. Then what's the reason? Isn't it said that the qualification for immortal cultivation is not entirely based on heredity? Like father like son or something like that? The lady boss sneered. Then he can use artificial spirit root. With his identity as one of the 7 members of the Hall of Immortal Cultivation in the Wanxian League, is it difficult for him to ask for a few high-grade spirit roots from Shungjing sect? As long as he is willing to open his mouth, he Daoren, in order to show his generosity, I'm afraid he would even give away the incomparably precious innate 12th layer spirit root. Wang Lu pondered for a moment. I don't think sect leader Feng Yin is the kind of person who can't put down his face. Is it because of the school's rules? But I think Lingjian School is actually not that rigidly adhering to the rules. That's what happened in the Immortal Gathering. They were so flexible that people almost thought that their credibility was lacking. The lady boss sighed. Yes, if artificial spirit root is useful, he would definitely find me one, and then take me on the road of immortal cultivation. But speaking of this, have you ever heard that more than 30 years ago, Lingjian School once experienced a big crisis? Never heard of it. Because that crisis came and went quickly, before it could cause any real damage, it was already eliminated by the Heavenly Sword Hall elders in advance, so not many people know about it. But in fact, that crisis almost destroyed Lingjian School, and the elders didn't have an easy time to deal with it. Is it because the 5th elder returned to the mountain?
Ew.
No, it's just that at that time I don't know where a 9-tailed fox came from. What, the 9-tailed fox? Isn't that the legendary mythological beast? Wang Lu was inexplicably surprised. In the past few days, after taking the time to read about the monsters in 9 regions, he was very clear about the meaning of the 9-tailed fox mentioned by the lady boss. It was a genuine mythological beast that was basically extinct in 9 regions in the past 100 years. Its collection value alone was already immeasurable. If it was made into a specimen, it wouldn't be worse than his void spirit root. Of course, from another point of view, any genuine mythological beast theoretically had a cultivation base close to that of a true immortal. Moreover, These mythological beasts had extraordinary wisdom, long lifespan, and always had some heavenly treasures on them, which were not worse than the magical treasures and spiritual treasures of cultivators. They were completely incomparable to those naked monsters that were raised by the sects in the small clear sky peak. For cultivators, it was almost impossible for them to challenge it. In the glorious era, perhaps a nine-tailed fox could only become an overlord. However, after the end of the Age of Chaos, when the surrounding spiritual energy was greatly weakened, it was enough to shake the entire 9 regions. However, at that time, the Heavenly Sword Hall had no intention to shake the 9 regions. Although they could ask for help from the Wanxian League and gather a group of top cultivators to deal with it, the sect leader decided to use the power of the Lingjian school to eliminate it. Upon hearing this, Wang Lu deeply frowned. Because the sect leader intended to monopolize the loot? No one knows what he was thinking at that time. Even in the Heavenly Sword Hall, most of the people strongly suggested to ask for help because it was not the time to show off. Even if the Shengjing sect was insufferably arrogant, when they encountered the invasion of a mythological beast, it was impossible for them to fight it alone. It's not that they couldn't beat it, but the loss outweighed the gain. It seems like the sect leader at that time had a wonderful way to quickly kill the mythological beast. If you want to say he did, he did. Isn't the fact that the magnificent 9-tailed fox didn't even have the time to show off in front of everyone before it was eliminated? The lady boss smiled sarcastically and then asked Wang Lu, "Have you heard of the celestial cycle god Xueqi?" "No, I don't understand, but I think it's awesome." "Yes, it's one of the top spells in the Stellar Sword method. Only the sect leader himself is qualified to practice it. Its function is to seal a god." "Seal a god? Is that true?" "It should be true. You've been in the sect for 2 years, so you should know that the founder of the Lingjian school obtained an ancient inheritance. This Stellar Sword method is one of them. It is said to be a true immortal level method. Although after thousands of years, part of the content has been lost. However, as one of the most important contents in the sword method, the God Seal is naturally a true immortal level spell. It's not surprising that it can seal a mythological beast. The only problem is, can you use a true immortal level spell? Considering that the sect leader was only at the demigod stage and was still a long way from the true immortal level, it was hard to imagine that he could use this spell. Of course, he can't use it by himself, but with the help of the sect's treasure, combined with the cloud and mist formation that has been passed down in the Lingjian school for thousands of years, mobilized the spiritual energy of the earth veins, and assisted by the 2 junior brothers whose cultivation is closest to his, he is qualified to use half of the god seal. A dignified demigod expert had to go through so much trouble to use half of the spell. With Wang Lu's current cultivation level, it was difficult for him to even imagine the outline of the spell. However, there was no doubt that it was effective in the end. That's right. Even if it's only half, it's enough to kill a mythological beast that has lost its intelligence for some reason. But it's also because it's only half that the god seal can't completely expel the mythological beast out of the 9 heavens, astral winds, or a specific mustard seed space. Just by using the power of the spell to suppress the mythological beast's resistance, it's already done its best. So, as the lady boss spoke, the sarcastic smile on her face deepened. So, the sect leader designed the next step of the formation. He combined the power of the earth veins of the Lingjian school with the mountain guarding formation, then activated the sacrificial method, using a newborn baby as a sacrifice to create a vacuum point. Then, through the connection between the earth veins and the god seal, he sealed the 9-tailed celestial fox in that vacuum point. Yes, that's right, as you guessed, that vacuum point is me. The 9-tailed celestial fox has always been sealed in my body. As she spoke, the girl pointed at herself and put on a proud posture. Unfortunately, there was no response. As the only listener, Wang Lu was dumbfounded. His whole body was as still as stone. At first, the lady boss thought it was quite interesting to scare a person like Wang Lu. However, after a while, he still stared at her, which made the girl feel slightly embarrassed. "Hey, have you seen enough? Is it that exaggerated? It's just a 9-tailed celestial fox. It's not worth being so surprised, right? Wang Lu came back to his senses, but he still had a look of disbelief. He pointed at the lady boss. Sister Ling, just now you said that happened more than 30 years ago. Yes, what's wrong? In other words, you're already an old woman in her 30s. Before he could finish his words, a pink but particularly powerful fist hit Wang Lu in the middle of his face. Chapter 61. After the lady boss revealed her identity, many mysteries were naturally solved. For example, why was she, a mere mortal world's martial artist, able to break a low-rank magical treasure with her bare hands, send Taoist master of Jindan stage Wang Wu flying, and even withstand the Dan-Chi attack of the golden thread red refined snake without being injured? This is a vacuum created by the combination of the Lingjian School's mountain guarding formation and the Blue River region's Feng Qi node. I don't know the specific principle, but anything related to spiritual energy and magical power will be expelled because of the existence of this vacuum, unless its power can surpass the Blue River region's Feng Qi and the mountain guarding formation, and forcibly break the vacuum. But even the nine-tailed celestial fox is far from being able to do this. I'm afraid only a true immortal can try. So, although the Golden Line's Scarlet Serpent's Dan-Chi is strong, it has no power on my body. But as a price, I have no fate with the immortal path and can only be a mortal martial artist for the rest of my life. After listening to this explanation, Wang Lu was silent for a while. In other words, a fantasy killer? Ah! Wang Lu sneered. Being sealed with a nine-tailed serpent in the body, gaining the ability to expel all spiritual energy and magical power, making it ineffective. Sure enough, this setting is very interesting. That right fist that almost destroyed my face was also very powerful. Please go to Miss Whirlpool Ling. What nonsense are you talking about? Nothing, it's just a little nostalgia. In short, Sister Ling, I already understand your past. It is indeed complicated and bizarre. It makes one sigh. Sigh, no wonder you hate your father. However, the lady boss was very surprised and seriously retorted, No, I don't hate him. How can I be so narrow-minded? He had no other choice at that time. To be able to protect everyone from the invasion of the divine beast, this is a very great achievement. And the reason why he didn't ask for help from outsiders, I think he must have his own difficulties. What's more, I've been living well all these years, except that I can't cultivate, there's no other impact. And thanks to the vacuum effect, I have an extra advantage when facing cultivators. How can I bear a grudge against him? Wang Lu didn't understand. Then, why do you have a bad relationship with him? If it were you, would you be happy if someone stuffed an out-of-control divine beast into your body and cut off your immortal fate for the rest of your life, only able to cultivate in the martial arts of the mortal world? I really don't hate him, but I don't like him either. In addition, that old thing often didn't know how to behave. He was stupid and had high myopia, so of course, our relationship wasn't good. Whenever I thought about how I was actually his daughter, I felt uncomfortable all over. Just like when you remember that your master is Wang Wu, you will also feel pain in the balls, right? What a good metaphor. Wang Lu exclaimed. The lady boss shrugged and added, Actually, it's not just that. That old man is always brooding over what happened more than 30 years ago. Every time he sees me, he looks at me as if I were born prematurely. Xueqi, I'm clearly a slender and graceful young lady in the prime of my life, okay? I don't think I'm worse than anyone else. Why do you always treat me like an inferior person? Also, he's an old pervert. Every time we meet, he'll find a way to be intimate with me, saying that he has a deep father-daughter relationship. It's very disgusting, okay? Wang Lu was surprised. I didn't expect the sect leader martial uncle to have an evil father relationship. Sister Ling, you've really suffered all these years. Humph, anyway, I was annoyed to death by him, so I simply went down the mountain a few years ago to open an inn, so that I wouldn't have to see him every day and affect my appetite. Hateful. He even tried to use his authority as the sect leader to force me back to the mountain, but I only stopped when I threatened to break his beloved antiques. Then, He unreasonably accused me of not having the ability to run an inn and said that opening an inn would cause me to lose money. More than 2 years ago, I made a bet with him that if I could run the inn well, he wouldn't have to care about me. Then, thanks to your help, that old bastard sulked for a whole month, haha. Wang Lu, I think I can probably understand why there were so many twists and turns in the immortal gathering. After saying so much, the secret that she endured in front of Wang Lu for 2 years was finally revealed. The lady boss's interest was also gone, so she waved her hand and said, "Well, I've said enough about me. Let's continue picking herbs. But first, don't think that I'm omnipotent. I can only nullify spiritual energy and magical power. I can't resolve physical damage. So, if we encounter a monster that fights purely with its physical body, I can't do anything." Wang Lu smiled and said, "It doesn't matter. This is already enough." In a sense, after the lady boss revealed the truth about her ability, her value in Wang Lu's eyes increased. This kind of fantasy killer ability, as long as it was used in the right situation, it could really play a miraculous effect. What was the red refined fruit? It was only the beginning of a great journey. Next, in this small clear sky peak, legendary herbs such as wailing ghost vine, flesh lingji. He wanted to pick all of them. Not only did he want to pick all over the small clear sky peak, he could even use the lady boss's vacuum to break through the small clear sky peak and fish in troubled waters. Although there were level 4 or 5 monsters in the large clear sky peak, did Wang Lu need to worry about it? No matter what level of monsters lived in the large clear sky peak, it was still the territory of the Spirit Sword Mountain, the territory of the Spirit Sword sect leader, Feng Yin. As long as he held onto the thigh of the sect leader's illegitimate daughter, Wang Lu didn't believe that he would really encounter any danger. Originally, the reason why he brought the lady boss here for experiential learning was half for the actual combat, and the other half was to amass wealth. But now, it seemed like a big opportunity was right in front of him. However, before Wang Lu could conceive this great experiential learning strategy and dig out all the remaining value of the small clear sky peak, a talisman suddenly lit up in his sleeve and automatically flew out, flashing in front of Wang Lu. Is this the sect's emergency assembly order? The person who receives it must rush to the spirit pool peak as soon as possible? Wang Lu immediately frowned. This emergency assembly was really bad timing. He had just picked the red refined fruit and completed the first step of the experiential learning. He didn't even have the time to carry out the rest of the content. His plan to plunder the small clear sky peak for the 3rd time had just begun, but it was interrupted by this talisman. Regarding this, the lady boss was particularly unhappy. Wang Lu, the team leader, had left, so of course, this experiential learning couldn't be played anymore. What's going on? Did the sect leader die? Spirit Sword Mountain, Spirit Pool Peak. Guided by the assembly order, Wang Lu walked through the Heavenly Policy Hall and came to a quiet and elegant small courtyard. When he arrived at the entrance, he saw that the talisman in front of him had already floated into the courtyard. Wang Lu looked up at the wooden plaque on the courtyard's entrance and confirmed the handwriting on it. Spirit Pool House. He couldn't help but be surprised. Wasn't this the place where the sect's middle-level and above managers usually had special meals? Because the courtyard was a small red and white building, ordinary people couldn't enter. Thus, the Ichi disciples often jokingly called it the Pink House, and they usually fantasized about the extravagant scene inside. What's more, they even wrote a number of pamphlets, making up the 12 golden hairpins and the like, which were kept in the Pink House for the elders' pleasure, describing all kinds of blood-boiling scenes. Of course, this kind of pamphlet could only be read in private. The Heavenly Policy Hall firmly cracked down on and boycotted this, but naturally it still couldn't be stopped. Among the people who wrote these pamphlets, the 2 most famous authors, Lu and Wang, were admired by countless male cultivators. Why did they summon me to this place for what? Could it be that they wanted to invite me, a well-known author, to do some on-the-spot reading? That's not bad. Although he couldn't figure it out, Wang Lu didn't think too much about it. He strode in confidently. Unfortunately, when he entered the courtyard, he discovered that this place was far from what he had expected. Although the building was exquisite and the environment was elegant, it wasn't as extravagant as the rumors said. Not to mention the 12 golden hairpins, there wasn't even a slightly exquisite puppet or mechanical person. The courtyard was filled with a cold atmosphere. This is the legendary Pink House. Tisk, it's really disappointing. I wonder which elder is running this place behind the scenes. It doesn't have the slightest concept of professional management. Instead, it's similar to the Rue family and in a certain Creek town. It's the kind of public enterprise of the sect that doesn't feel the pinch even if it dies. Alas, if I can think of a way to privately contract this place at a low price, that would be great. First, I can release a few avant-garde concepts, then I can conduct an illegal fundraising in the sect, and finally take the money. With this thought in mind, under the guidance of the talisman, Wang Lu finally entered the Pink House. There were only 2 or 3 rooms in the building, and the person who summoned him was sitting in the middle of the Pink House, which was also the largest room. Unsurprisingly, it was the several martial uncles of the Heavenly Sword Hall. Only they had the qualifications to summon true disciples at will. Wang Lu steadily walked in front of them, and, according to the requirements of the sect, he saluted them one by one. Greetings, sect leader martial uncles, second martial uncles, third martial uncles, and... Wang Lu paused, looking at the cultivator, whose entire face was hidden in the hood. May I ask who you are? The several elders laughed in unison, which immediately made Wang Lu feel like he was being teased. Sect leader Feng Yin explained with a smile. Wang Lu, you haven't been in the sect for a long time, and I'm afraid your master doesn't have the patience to teach you much common knowledge about the sect. So, it's not strange that you don't recognize him. He is your 7th martial uncle, the 7th elder of the Heavenly Sword Hall, the Peak Master of the Blue Cloud Peak. He has been wandering outside for 3 years and has just returned today. When he came back, he specifically asked to see you, so I summoned you here. 7th martial uncle? Wang Lu was taken aback. No wonder he was urgently summoned back. It turned out that the Peak Master of the Blue Cloud Peak had come to find him. This guy really came back at a bad time, and he didn't come with good intentions. He actually called me in this Pink House. He has ulterior motives. He didn't know whether Sister Ling and Fatty had the ability to pick the red refined fruit, or else the permit he had obtained from Mu Xiao would be wasted. While he was thinking, the 7th elder spoke first. You are 5th martial sister's disciple, the cultivator with the void spirit root, who created a miracle 2 years ago. Wang Lu? You really live up to your reputation. You are very similar to 5th martial sister. Wang Lu was immediately unhappy. Who is similar to that shameless and shameless master? This martial uncle. You have just met, and you're already slandering me. Are you deliberately looking for trouble with me? However, what happened next was very unexpected. The 7th elder's attitude was very enthusiastic. He quickly stood up and circled around Wang Lu twice, repeatedly praising him. You really have a good foundation and you look talented. You are indeed 5th martial sister's true disciple. Then, he took out an exquisite jade box from his wide sleeves. Here, take this. This is a cloud-harmonizing pill that I refined from immortal glass cloudgrass when I was traveling in the eastern border state. It's not something valuable, but it represents Uncle Master's sincerity. Take it as a greeting gift. Wang Lu was stunned for a moment, thinking that this cloud-melting pill sounded a little familiar, as if he had seen it in a book somewhere. When he tried to recall, he was suddenly shocked. Chapter 2, Section 13 of the 9 Provinces Immortal Cloud Records, Eastern Border States Wan Qingshan, Patriarch Ping He, after 53 years of research and experimentation, picked blue cloud grass and refined it into a pill. The one who consumed it could transform into clouds and mist, changing unpredictably. This pill was called Cloud Melting Pill, a second-grade spirit pill. Second-grade spirit pill. This was actually a second-grade spirit pill? This was definitely not something that was worthless. Although it could not be compared to the higher-grade immortal pills, it was still a first-class spirit pill. Any second-grade spirit pill would be worth tens of thousands of spirit stones, not to mention that this cloud-melting pill was famous for its practicality. It would not be surprising if it could be sold for 100,000 spirit stones. The seventh elder actually took it out so casually as a greeting gift. This was really flattering. The problem was, there was no love without reason in this world. This was the first time this seventh elder had met him, so why was he so attentive? Casually tipping him 100,000 spirit stones. Did he think he was the leader of the Wanxian League? Although the Lingjian school was not a poor sect, the elders were not that rich. While Wang Lu was hesitating, the seventh elder took the initiative and stuffed the jade box into Wang Lu's hand. Take it, no need to be so polite. Fifth senior sister saved my life, and she has been taking care of me for so many years. Her disciple is my disciple. A mere cloud-melting pill is nothing. It can't even repay fifth senior sister's kindness. Sigh, it's a pity that she is not in the sect now. This time, when she went out to travel, I did as she asked and brought a lot of souvenirs. But later, I'll have to trouble you to bring them back for her. As he spoke, this mysterious but enthusiastic elder took out a big pile of mustard seed bags from his sleeve. They were of different styles, but all of them were of high quality. Obviously, they were all souvenirs from his travel. For a moment, it almost blinded Wang Lu's dog eyes. What was the seventh elder up to? He actually claimed that his master had saved his life, and it seemed that the relationship between them was really close. The martial uncles next to him were not surprised. They just smiled slightly and shook their heads, obviously tacitly agreeing with the seventh elder's enthusiasm. What kind of magical development was this? With her master's character, shouldn't she be the spokesperson of "I have very few friends"? She even dared to offend the headmaster and the disciplinary elder, these powerful people, and even made them black for life. How could she have such a generous friend? With endless shock, Wang Lu took the mustard seed bags one by one, then stared at the seventh elder with wide eyes, as if he wanted to see through the shadow cast by the layer of the hood. At this time, the headmaster smiled again. "Junior brother, everyone here is one of us. You can also take off your hood." The seventh elder was stunned for a moment, then patted his head. "Really, I'm used to wearing it when I'm outside. I'm completely used to it." While speaking, the cultivator pulled down the hood, revealing the mysterious face that was hidden and talking about the old days. Crash! There was a burst of shattering sound. The mustard seed bags in Wang Lu's hands all fell to the ground. This successor disciple, who had experienced too many magical developments and had long trained his ability to remain calm, was finally petrified under the extreme shock. After a long time, Wang Lu slowly opened his mouth. His voice was hoarse and seemed to be extremely difficult. "Uncle, Uncle Black." It turned out that what was hidden under the hood was a dark face. Only the sclera of the eyes and the 2 rows of teeth in the mouth were incomparably white, showing a great contrast. Moreover, his nose was wide, his lips were thick, his hair was curly, and his facial features were completely unlike those of ordinary 9 regions people. If outsiders were here, they would definitely exclaim, "Kunlun slaves of the Western continent." Yes, they were Kunlun slaves from the Western continent. Nowadays, the exchanges between the 9 regions and the Western continent were getting more and more frequent. In 9 regions, those blonde and blue-eyed foreigners from the Western continent were no longer uncommon. Some sects even took in foreign cultivators. However, black-haired and black-skinned Kunlun slaves were very rare. As a matter of fact, the Kunlun slaves of the Western continent were not local residents, but slaves brought back by some adventurous Western continent people from the other side of the Endless Sea. After hundreds of thousands of years, these slaves lived and multiplied in the Western continent. Then, along with the exchange between the 2 continents, they came to 9 regions and gradually formed their own ethnic group. However, from the name Kunlun slaves alone, it was not difficult to see that these black people, no matter which continent, had no status to speak of. First, their number was scarce, and second, their level of civilization was far behind. More importantly, the number of people with magical ability was too small. Needless to say, the group of cultivators in the 9 regions, even after experiencing the catastrophe of the Age of Chaos, the Wanxian League still had an extremely powerful commanding and deterrent force. As for the Western continent, the group of people called magicians and priests could not be underestimated. In the beginning, when the civilizations of the two continents intersected, many fierce battles caused heavy losses to both sides. However, the Kunlun slaves were far behind. According to the experts of the Wanxian League and the Western continent, most of the Kunlun slaves were still stuck in the primitive era. The so-called elders and witch doctors with magical ability used the most primitive witchcraft and witchcraft. Their cultivation system was simple and primitive, far from being comparable to the two continents. What was worse was that, because of their bloodline and culture, it was difficult for these Kunlun slaves to integrate into the cultivation system of the two continents. So far, in the Wanxian League, there were already deity stage cultivators from the Western continent, and there were even many Yuanying stage cultivators. Only the Kunlun slaves, even the number of Taoist Master King Pill could be counted on one hand. Most of them ate some kind of heavenly treasure to be able to advance. Therefore, if the existence of this Kunlun slave, who was one of the elders of the Heavenly Sword Hall in the Lingjian school, was known to outsiders, it would certainly cause a great shock. However, it was obvious that whether it was the seventh elder or the Lingjian school, they had no interest in causing a shock in the 9 regions. They were only interested in shocking their own people. Hearing Wang Lu calling him Uncle Black in astonishment, several elders burst into laughter. Only the 7th elder, who was 70% cordial and 30% embarrassed, touched his short, curly hair. Hee, I am indeed a bit black, so calling me Uncle Black is not wrong. Later on, you can just call me Uncle Black. Previously, 5th senior sister always called me Black Ghost. The disciplinary elder shook his head and said, "How can you be so rude? Junior brother, you are, after all, an elder of the sect. No matter how much you spoil and indulge, you can't break the etiquette." It doesn't matter if Wang Lu blurted it out in astonishment, but later on, "You can't call me that incorrectly." The 7th elder somewhat awkwardly scratched his head. "Senior brother is right, I understand." At the same time, he secretly winked at Wang Lu, as if to say, "Don't mind that old antique." However, Wang Lu really didn't want to make eye contact with Uncle Black, so he coughed twice and perfunctorily brushed it off. Then his heart was in a mess. It was not because he was nervous, but because the unfolding of the plot contained too much information. Even if he had the quality foundation of a professional adventurer for a while, he still couldn't handle it. This Lingjian school was really a strange sect. Not only did they have 5th elder, who broke the 9 regions' bottom line and pulled down the Wanxian League style, they even had a black uncle elder? Putting on a show of Little Black's immortal cultivation? What exactly happened to this world? Calm down, calm down. Wang Lu said to himself in his heart. As a professional adventurer, even if Mount Tai collapsed in front of him, he must remain calm. What was a mere black uncle? There were all kinds of strange things in the world. No matter how strange Black Uncle was, could he be as strange as the existence of his master, Wang Wu? Moreover, this also explained why my master, who was a loner and had very few friends, would have such a good relationship with this simple and honest uncle. Humph, how many women don't like a black uncle? Especially this 7th elder's burly figure. He must be the model of a big tool. While he was thinking, the 7th elder smiled again. By the way, I haven't introduced myself yet. Let's not talk about other identities. My name is Ao Guanhai. I hope we can get along well in the future. Ao Guanhai. Chapter 62. The return of the 7th elder didn't cause any surprise in the sect. For most of the Spirit Sword sect's disciples, the elders going out to wander was nothing new. As an ancient sect, the Lingjian school had always advocated traveling thousands of miles and reading thousands of books. Not only did they encourage the disciples to go out for experiential learning, they also had the same requirement for the elders. As long as there was an opportunity, they might as well go out to wander. In any case, in a sect that was properly managed, it wouldn't be as if it couldn't operate without someone. On the other hand, having someone more wouldn't make people feel uncomfortable. The addition of the seventh elder in the sect didn't have much of an impact on the daily cultivation and lives of the others. In fact, for the common people, the seventh elder of the Lingjian school was a mysterious person. He didn't have a successor disciple, and he rarely went to the Tung Cloud Hall to teach. Almost half of his time was spent wandering outside, and the other half was spent in the clear sky peak looking after the spirit flowers and spirit beasts. Occasionally, he would appear in front of people's eyes, but he was wearing a hooded robe, which tightly covered his face. Even some of the senior brothers who had been in the sect for more than 30 years had never seen his true face. Among the 10 great elders of the sect, the 7th elder and the 10th elder are the most mysterious. This was the consensus of the sect. Among them, the 10th elder was rumored to have a big heartache when he was young, so he permanently lived in seclusion in the hidden Sword Peak. Even the sect leader rarely had the opportunity to meet him. The 7th elder looked after the clear sky peak, but his true face was hidden in his hood, which made him look mysterious. Some people speculated that he was born with a cold and unsociable personality, and some people speculated that he was disfigured when he was young. There were many different theories. As for his identity as a Kunlun slave, except for a few people, no one knew about it. However, those who had truly come into contact with the 7th elder would discover that this outsider clan elder's character was extremely warm and cheerful, even naive and unaffected. His greatest characteristic was undoubtedly his generosity and kindness. If one was to be treated as a friend by him, it would be an extremely fortunate thing. Now, the one who enjoyed this blessing was the non-phase Peak's Wang Lu. After Elder Guanhai returned to the mountain, he routinely went back and forth to non-phase Peak every day. His purpose was very clear: to wait for Fifth Sister to come back, to give her a big surprise, a warm hug, and of course a lot of greeting gifts. Such sincerity was praiseworthy and lamentable. However, this elder's enthusiasm and persistence, as if he had come to collect a debt, made Wang Lu unable to bear it. This was because this black uncle would come very early every time. As soon as the rooster crowed, he would knock on the door on time. He was even more punctual than Zhou Bapi, forcing Wang Lu to sleep early and wake up early every day. He had originally planned to give himself a long vacation and sleep every day until the sunset. He would live a degenerate life, because recently there was really nothing else to do. In terms of cultivation, after reaching the 8th layer of the sword bone, before obtaining the 9th layer of the sword bone, Wang Lu basically had no other way to practice. He could only meditate daily and then absorb the spiritual energy through the sword bone's filtration to accumulate the golden liquid. As for martial arts, the lady boss said that there was no method that was particularly suitable for him to teach. The winding steps and soft cloud sword were already the best choices for the transition period, although it was not that he couldn't learn a few more high-level martial arts. When Wang Wu came back and taught him the non-phase sword art, these martial arts would soon be covered, and learning them would be a waste. As for experiential learning, it was even more meaningless. The Experiential Learning Challenge of the Small Clear Sky Peak has been certified by the Heavenly Sword Hall. After obtaining nearly 3,000 challenge points, the remaining value of the Small Clear Sky Peak was almost squeezed dry. As for the elixirs in the Azure Dragon Gorge, last time, Little Ling Air and Wenbao did not disappoint him by picking the red refined fruit. As a result, when they came to the non-phase peak to present the treasure, the victim, Ao Guanhai, was also there. It was reasonable to say that when Wang Lu brought Little Ling Air, this cheating existence, to the clear sky peak, it was against the sect's rules, especially when he tricked a public official to issue a permit. But naturally, the collection of the red refined fruit could not be said to be justified. But when Ao Guanhai, the victim, saw the red refined fruit, he laughed and, without demur, took out the alchemy furnace on the spot, prepared his own auxiliary materials, and refined a box of third-rank elixirs on the spot for Wang Lu. But martial Uncle Guanhai treated you like this. Do you have the nerve to go to the clear sky peak to plunder? Do you have the nerve? Wang Lu asked himself, even if his conscience had been polluted by his master's harmful breath for more than 2 years, but he still couldn't do it. Therefore, there was neither a cultivation method to cultivate nor a place to gain experience. In addition to continuing to be a top student in the Tin Cloud Hall, he could only wait for his master to come back. In this regard, Wang Lu himself was helpless, but martial Uncle Guanhai was simply distressed. Little Wang Lu, although your aptitude is amazing and your perception is superb, cultivating to become an immortal requires great perseverance. How can you be like this? While reading the popular novel imported from the Spirit Creek town at the foot of the mountain, Wang Lu very suspiciously looked at Uncle Black, who was cooking in the kitchen. He inwardly said, "Every day you waste your precious morning at the non-phase peak to accompany me as my husband. Is that the embodiment of great perseverance?" After a while, martial Uncle Guanhai brought out 4 dishes and a soup and put them on the table. He then found 3 sets of chopsticks, one for himself, one for Wang Lu, and one for 5th martial sister. Moreover, according to Wang Lu's request, a black and white portrait was placed next to the chopsticks, which meant that 5th martial sister was with them. While eating lunch, martial Uncle Guanhai eagerly asked, "Little Wang Lu, do you have any difficulties in cultivation recently?" "Yes." Wang Lu put down his chopsticks and seriously said, "My master is too stupid. I beg for a refund." Even the optimistic and cheerful black uncle was choked by this sentence and rolled his eyes. Other than that, I have nothing to do." After briefly explaining his own pain in the ass situation, martial Uncle Guanhai heaved a long sigh. "I can't believe that at such a young age, you can actually cultivate your body to such a level that you can resist Little Thunder's lightning strike with your bare hands. And Senior Sister's new version of non-phase sword bone is even more marvelous. The 8th layer is equivalent to the previous 15th layer. Little Wang Lu, you are actually cultivating the foundation building realm's body refining technique. Moreover, it's the top foundation building realm's body refining technique." Wang Lu blinked his eyes, trying to show a bit of gratitude, but he soon failed. No matter how top the body refining technique, if there's no follow-up, it would be reduced to a eunuch. There's nothing praiseworthy about it. Hearing this, Uncle Black also frowned. Indeed, once Senior Sister leaves the mountain, I don't know how long it will take for her to come back. It's a good thing that your cultivation progress is faster than she expected, but don't delay it because of this. How about this? If you don't mind, I can help you take a look. Wang Lu was suspicious. Look?
How?
Uncle Black very innocently blinked his eyes. Of course, look inside you. F***CK me. Look inside me? Sure enough, Uncle Black's nature hasn't changed.
Dream on.
No, don't even dream about me, just dream about my master. She is a perfect match for you. Guanhai was even more innocent. Why do I feel like you're thinking about something rude? I'm just using the internal inspection technique to observe your body, refining technique. Of course, if you don't want to make it public, then forget it. Just internal inspection technique. Wang Lu nodded hesitantly and made a difficult decision in his life. Martial Uncle, please observe. As a peak Yuanying stage elder, Ao Guanhai's internal inspection technique was silent. His eyes had already seen Wang Lu's inner mansion. The more than 200 golden sword bones made him frown slightly. What a pure sword bone technique, worthy of being the cultivation genius favored by Senior Sister. Oh, the non-phase emperor bone in the sky? It turns out that Senior Sister's whimsical idea can finally be put into practice. That being the case, I think I can guess the next step. Wang Lu asked, "Are you going to use the golden liquid as the material to transform the inner mansion?" Oh, you guessed it wrong. Transforming the inner mansion is the next step.
Now.
Martial Uncle Guanhai smiled and gave the answer. Your task is to practice the real non-phase sword bone. The real non-phase sword bone? Using this expression, did he want to say that what he was practicing now was a fake product? It's not a fake product, but little Wang Lu, I just want to ask you a simple question. For you, what characteristics should a sword have? Wang Lu said, sharpness, toughness, purity.
About these?
Yes, then can the more than 200 sword bones in your body have these characteristics? Wang Lu suddenly gawked. if this standard was used to measure the sword bones. Indeed, the more than 200 jade pillars were indomitable and even pierced through the sky. It stood to reason that they should have sharpness, but after fusing with the outer wall, the tip had long been rounded and the pillar was smooth and clean, so they had no affinity with the word sharpness. As for toughness, it should take into account both hardness and flexibility. There was no doubt about the hardness of this non-phase sword bone, but its ductility was very doubtful. Who would choose a flexible pillar? The last point of purity was even more problematic. This golden jade pillar seemed to be pure, but how could it allow foreign things to invade it? Right now, the sword bone, as a channel to communicate with the surrounding spiritual energy and the inner mansion, obviously had a hollow structure. So, Martial Uncle Guanhai said, "What you practice is just the first part of the non-phase sword bone." Scabbard? What the hell? There's even a scabbard? The real non-phase sword bone, even though it's still mainly focused on defense, it will have all the characteristics of a sword: sharpness, toughness, purity. It's not like this. Moreover, as long as you cultivate a section of the sword bone, your body training stage will be greatly improved. Of course, on the other hand, the cultivation of each section of the sword bone will be quite difficult. This process is likely to continue until you reach the Shidon stage. At least, it's impossible to cultivate more than 200 sword bones in the chi refining stage. It's not that easy. Listening to Uncle Black's endless chatter, Wang Lu could not help but ask, "Martial Uncle, are you sure?" Martial Uncle Guanhai thought for a moment. "Well, although I haven't exchanged cultivation experience with senior sister for several years, I know the design idea of her non-phase sword bone. At least it's not wrong. Therefore, I can also guess the next step of the sword bone cultivation method. How about this? You wait for me for 2 days. I'll prepare a medicine for you. With it, the next step of cultivation will be twice the result with half the effort." After saying that, Martial Uncle Guanhai left without staying for even a moment. And this time, he really left for 2 days. During this time, he didn't come to disturb his sleep. It was not until the morning of the 3rd day that this foreign race elder, with a pair of swollen red eyes, excitedly knocked on the door. "Little Wang Lu, I've refined it." Wang Lu, who had stayed up all night reading novels, had just fallen asleep when he was startled and jumped up. However, when he opened the door and saw the elixir in his martial uncle's hand, all of his grievances disappeared. A round and smooth crystal-clear elixir was quietly lying in his martial uncle's palm, like an amber. However, it contained a surging medicinal efficacy, as well as a sharp sword intent. As a void spirit root, Wang Lu could clearly feel it. Even though he didn't have any attainments in alchemy, Wang Lu could still recognize the value of this elixir. Compared to his 7th martial uncle's greeting gift, the harmonious cloud pill, it was a real first-grade elixir. "Martial Uncle, this is the medicine I need for the next step of cultivation?" Guanhai nodded his head. "Yes, this is the non-phase sword pill that your master and I jointly developed and designed 60 years ago. It was specially made for sword bone. In the past, every time senior sister refined a section of sword bone, she needed a sword pill to assist her. Those days were really difficult. Fortunately, now it's the 23rd edition. The effect has been greatly improved. This pill's efficacy should be able to support you to refine 5 sections of sword bone, that is, until the foundation building stage. Unfortunately, I don't have all the herbs on hand, otherwise I can refine a few more for you. I can help you smoothly cultivate all the way to the Shidon stage." Guanhai's regretful sigh made Wang Lu shocked. This was a first-grade elixir. "Martial Uncle, you casually gave me a reward, but you actually feel guilty about it." This kind of spiritual realm was simply like the legendary high-end player, Dali. 3 days later, with the help of Martial Uncle Guanhai, Wang Lu began the real cultivation of the non-phase sword bone. The non-phase sword bone, at least in the early stages, was not difficult to practice. The difficult part was the 5th elder's exquisite idea and creativity. Now that Ao Guanhai was in charge of the general direction, Wang Lu only needed to do the cultivation step by step, and the rest would come naturally. According to Martial Uncle Guanhai, the choice of the first section of sword bone was open. Among the 206 sword bones, one could choose anyone. Of course, after the choice was made, it would determine the direction of development for a long time in the future. For example, if he chose the skull, then it should strengthen the cultivation of spells. If he chose the arm bone, then naturally, swordsmanship would be the priority. After thinking about it, Wang Lu finally made a decision. He would first practice the finger bone because the flexibility of the finger was one of the key differences between humans and animals. And the so-called swordsmanship, in fact, the most exquisite changes came from the wrist and the finger. Therefore, under the guidance of Martial Uncle Guanhai, Wang Lu successfully practiced the non-phase sword bone, middle finger. The success of the middle finger sword bone was indeed like what Martial Uncle said, the impact was all around. Not only the middle finger had countless wonderful uses, but the entire inner mansion's 206 sword scabbard bones were also sublimated because of the birth of the first sword bone. The specific principle of this, Ao Guanhai was not very clear, but Wang Lu could guess one or two. It was very simple, the balance of yin and yang. Once he understood the relationship between the sword scabbard and the sword bone, then the inner mansion's empty sword scabbard was like a group of resentful women. Now, although the sword bone was only a section, it also made these swords scabbard more or less moisturized, and naturally, the effect would increase. In order to celebrate this qualitative breakthrough, Wang Lu personally cooked a few dishes that day, such as scrambled eggs with tomatoes, scrambled eggs with tomatoes, scrambled tomatoes with tomatoes, and scrambled eggs with eggs. He warmly hosted a banquet to entertain Martial Uncle Guanhai. Fortunately, when Martial Uncle Guanhai attended the banquet that day, he was very conscious to bring a roasted chicken and a bottle of wine, so that the banquet would not be awkward. In his own words, because every time senior sister invited me to dinner, it was always shallot mixed with tofu, tofu mixed with shallot, shallot mixed with shallot, and tofu mixed with tofu. Wang Lu looked at the red and yellow hot dishes on the table and said in his heart, "Not bad. At least he is more conscience than master." The two of them ate and drank at the table. The wine that Elder Guanhai brought was brewed from immortal grass and immortal fruit, and its alcohol strength was amazing. Moreover, he did not suppress it with his cultivation base. Not long after, he and Wang Lu were both drunk. Of course, the two of them were drunk, but not drunk. Because of Elder Guanhai's cultivation base, his primordial spirit was strong, and Wang Lu had never let go of his vigilance against Uncle He, so how could he really get drunk? But even so, the two of them gradually opened up to talk about sex on the table. Seventh Martial Uncle, forgive me for being rude, but you have been too good to me during this period of time. You imparted your skills, protected me, and made pills for me. I am very scared. Martial Uncle Guanhai laughed. Senior sister's disciple is my disciple. Moreover, senior sister had specially reminded me to take good care of you in her letter. How could I not take good care of you? Haha. Sigh. Master was just saying it casually. Martial Uncle, you don't have to be so serious. In the end, Guanhai became even more serious. He raised his head as if he was reminiscing about the 100 years of cultivation. Senior sister, she is someone who has helped me a lot. Without senior sister, there would be no today's Ao Guanhai. Speaking of which, my name was also given by senior sister. Speaking to this, Martial Uncle Guanhai gave a silly smile. To tell you the truth, when I was first sold as a slave from the western continent to the 9 regions, it was the founders of the Lingjian school who saved me and gave me freedom. However, it was 5th senior sister's words that gave me the opportunity to embark on the path of immortal cultivation. It was also her who made me throw away my previous name, Ao Baba, and changed it to Ao Guanhai. 100 years later, my former companions who were liberated have already died, and only I have Yuanying stage cultivation base. All of this is senior sister's credit, so how could I dare not obey her advice? At this point, Guanhai's dark face unexpectedly showed a trace of holiness and piety. This immediately sobered up Wang Lu a little bit, thinking, adultery. This face definitely has adultery. With master's character, How could she possibly help others to embark on the immortal path and grant them a new life? Trampling on other people's life and worldview is her job, isn't it? Out of this doubt, Wang Lu bluntly said, "Martial uncle, excluding personal feelings and other factors, if you want to objectively evaluate my master, what kind of person is she?" What kind of person is fifth senior sister? Of course she's a good person. You're her disciple, so you should know her very well. I think we're probably not talking about the fifth elder of the same plane. After Wang Lu thought about it, this might be the only explanation. Wang Wu actually had a twin sister named Wang Lu, who is gentle and considerate, elegant and generous, and 100% good person. Regarding Wang Lu's inconceivable words, Ao Guanhai froze for a long time and then patted Wang Lu's shoulder with emotion. Some people and things can only be seen clearly after being in contact with them for a long time. Fifth senior sister is a maverick person, but her nature is not bad. Wang Lu naturally could only chuckle at this. This black elder was a kind person, and in the eyes of a kind person, there were only kind things, which was not unusual. But the judgment of a normal person was obviously not so kind. Regarding Wang Lu's incomprehension, Ao Guanhai didn't mind. One day you will understand. Yes, probably only after a long time will you understand. Chapter 63. The drunken conversation with martial uncle Ao Guanhai at the table faded away the next day as he woke up. His martial uncle was still the optimistic martial uncle. His pair of dark face always hung with an optimistic and positive smile. Whenever he mentioned his fifth senior sister, his face would always be as pious as a pilgrim. As for Wang Lu, he still couldn't have any positive impression of his master. However, that drunken conversation more or less left a shadow in Wang Lu's mind. After that, although Wang Lu was very resistant, he still recalled the details of his master's life in the past 2 years from time to time, trying to dig out evidence that she was a good person. To be honest, Wang Wu was definitely not a bad person. At least, she had never done it, and there was no sign that she would do evil things. But other than that, this person was greedy, lustful, and had no moral integrity. No matter how he looked at her, she was far from the model senior sister in martial uncle Ao Guanhai's eyes. No, they were two completely opposite people. So, how did his master leave such an unforgettable impression on martial uncle Ao Guanhai? Although this foreign race elder was simple and honest, he was not a fool. How could he be an elder of spirit sword sect with the identity of a foreign race be a fool? Although according to martial uncle Guanhai, he had received great kindness from his master when he was young, but after nearly 100 years, no matter how great the kindness was, it was definitely not the reason why martial uncle admired him so much. What's more, during this period, martial uncle Guanhai refined the sword pill for her, and other elixirs were also provided to her like water. No matter how many lives he saved, it was enough to repay the kindness. But he still acted like he owed her a lot. From this, it could be deduced that his master was fooling a fool. Oh no, how brilliant was her communication skills. If she could learn this trick, she could make the head of the school, the elder of training, and the elder in charge of punishment. Wouldn't she be free and unfettered in Lingjian school in the future? With all kinds of fantasies, Wang Lu walked into the cafeteria of Misty Peak. Because he freeloaded too much at the Ru family inn and ate 3 days' worth of food, Wang Lu had been temporarily blacklisted by Little Ling Air. What was more hateful was that she also hung a sign at the door. Wang Lu and pigs are not allowed in. Wang Lu was not happy at that time. It's fine if you don't let me in, but why bother when Bao? Without the free food from the Ru family inn, he could only come to the Misty Peak cafeteria to experience the philosophy of life of the Western chef. Following the previous, 13 gangsters look up at the starry sky. This time, the blonde gourmet invented a dish called sword in the stone. According to Wang Lu's observation, it was roughly a frozen fish that was inserted upside down into a pancake. Other than pancakes and fish, can't you have something fresh? While breaking the edge of the pancake, he swallowed it bit by bit with water. Wang Lu felt that he couldn't live on anymore. He couldn't help but hate his unscrupulous master, who gave him a long-term meal ticket in Misty Peak. Can't you save some wine money and get me a meal ticket in Carefree Peak? However, halfway through his meal, Wang Lu suddenly found that it was a bit too quiet around him. Although the Misty Peak had never been popular for various reasons, there would usually be 3 to 5 people in the cafeteria at noon. But today, how come he was the only one here? Could it be that he was shocked by the stone sword? Thinking of this, Wang Lu couldn't help but ask, "Where the hell are all the peoples?" Then, he heard a clear female voice. "Everyone went to 4 Divisions Peak, just an hour ago." Wang Lu turned his head and saw the Western gourmet helplessly standing at the entrance of the kitchen. Apparently, she was sad about the deserted scene. Different from the general impression of a chef, this Western gourmet didn't have a big head and thick neck, nor did she have a big waist and fat belly. Instead, she was a petite but beautiful girl. She looked about 13 or 14 years old, but her pair of green eyes carried the vicissitudes of life that didn't belong to her age. This chef was by no means an ordinary chef. To be able to travel thousands of miles from the Western continent, this girl obviously had a lot of stories. Moreover, it could be seen from one point. What she did in the Misty Peak cafeteria caused the wrath of the heavens and the resentment of the people, yet the elders didn't respond to the call to expel her from the mountain. However, Wang Lu never inquired about this gossip. In the words of a professional adventurer, "Don't randomly accept tasks that you shouldn't accept, and don't trigger side tasks that you shouldn't trigger." Therefore, he just followed the girl's topic and asked, "Why did you go to 4 Divisions Peak?" "It seems that the 5th elder has returned to the mountain." Wang Lu was stunned, thinking, "Master has returned to the mountain? That's pretty fast." Then the next question was, if that guy has returned to the mountain, then she has returned to the mountain. How could she attract the attention of tens of thousands of people? Is her popularity that good? If it was Huayun, it would still be okay. The young chef girl said, "It seems that she has caused some trouble and was chased to the front door."
Puff.
Sure enough. Although he had already expected this, out of humanitarian concern, Wang Lu still weakly asked, "What trouble did she cause? Did she make a local girl pregnant and was forced to marry by the other party's father?" The young chef girl shook her head. "This is not clear. I just heard other people talking about it when they were eating. It seems that the 5th elder is being interrogated by the other elders of the Heavenly Sword Hall. AI. This is really a happy occasion," Wang Lu said, and tore a piece of cake. After eating and drinking, he was ready to go to the 4 Divisions Peak to watch the condemnation. However, after the young chef girl provided the information, she didn't immediately return to the kitchen. Instead, she frowned and said, "I remember. You are the disciple of the 5th elder? Something happened to your master. Aren't you worried?" Wang Lu thought for a moment. "I'm only worried that the elders will give face to her fellow disciples and give her a way out. If we can take this opportunity to correct her twisted character and help her reconstruct her personality, I believe that it will greatly improve the average style of the entire immortal cultivation world." These words were a little long, and the foreign race girl had some difficulty listening to them. After a while, her delicate eyebrows furrowed even deeper. "You hate your master?" Wang Lu seriously thought for a moment. "From a personal point of view, I actually admire her shamelessness. But as a person of society, considering the general moral level of the public, I have no choice but to firmly despise her." "Sorry, I don't quite understand." The young girl's green eyes were filled with calmness and sincerity. "But I think that you have a serious misunderstanding about your master. I have met Wang Wu many times. She is a real swordsman with an iron will and character. Such a person is not a bad person." Wang Lu was shocked on the spot. This Western continent chef didn't taste her own food and then became delirious, right? Or does she have the same short-sightedness as the sect leader? A real swordsman? An iron will? Who is she talking about? The young girl further explained, "I used to be the king. That, in short, I have dealt with a lot of excellent knights and I know how to distinguish a person's temperament. Believe me, Your master is a very good cultivator. Wang Lu sighed. You, a Western continent chef who can't even distinguish between soy sauce and vinegar, have the nerve to say that you know how to distinguish? Anyone who bought a long-term meal ticket from your family would probably become a good person with excellent character. That being said, however, when Wang Lu left the Misty Peak and headed toward the Four Divisions Peak, the doubts in his heart inevitably increased. If it was only that green-eyed chef's words, Wang Lu would just regard her as a retard. However, combined with the seventh elder's words, Wang Lu couldn't help but hesitate. Could it be that there is really something wrong with that guy's character? TSK, if there is a chance in the future, I have to use a magnifying glass to observe her. But for now, it's better to go to the Four Divisions Peak and watch the fun first. Along the way to the Four Divisions Peak from time to time, he could see the senior brothers and sisters of the sect gathering at the Four Divisions Peak from all directions. Obviously, they were all gossipers. Moreover, they obviously haven't arrived at the scene yet, but as they walked, they already began to talk and spread all kinds of gossip. And the rumors that he heard along the way made Wang Lu frown. A disciple of the Carefree Peak who had been in the sect for about 15 years asked, I heard that this time, the fifth elder offended someone again? Next to him was another senior disciple of the Carefree Peak, so he obviously had more sources of gossip. Yes, I heard that it was an elder of a big sect, and he was very aggressive. Fifth elder. I usually don't have much contact with her. Senior brother, you should know more about her. What kind of person is she? That senior disciple hesitated for a while and said in a low voice, I also don't know much about her, but it is said that among the elders of the Heavenly Sword Hall, other than the seventh elder who has a good relationship with her, the others all have a deep hatred for her. The young disciple was a little surprised. Deep hatred? It can't be that serious, right? Sigh, it really doesn't seem that serious. It is said that the 10 elders have all survived a catastrophe that happened 100 years ago, so of course they have to give each other some face. However, as far as I know, the second elder and the third elder have always been impeaching the fifth elder, hoping to expel her from the Heavenly Sword Hall. So serious? The young disciple was surprised. Is it because of her cultivation? Speaking of which, among the 10 elders of the Heavenly Sword Hall, only she has a king pill cultivation. Speaking of this, the young disciple hesitated and said, but it is said that she is a famous master of defense. The senior disciple sneered. So, what if she is a master of defense? She is just a king pill cultivator. No matter how good she is at defense, can she withstand a blow from a Yuanian cultivator? She is probably bragging, otherwise, how can she have a sense of existence in the sect? Now, there are several inner court disciples who have reached the king pill realm. As an elder, does she have the nerve to do that? The young disciple was stunned for a while. Senior brother, your words are a bit too absolute. Didn't Master often say that cultivation is not absolute? In the immortal cultivation world, cross-stage challenges happen from time to time. The senior disciple shook his head and said, cultivators with natural spiritual roots fight cultivators with man-made spiritual roots. Ancient sects fight ordinary sects. Heavenly spiritual roots fight 5 elements, spiritual roots. Indeed, cross-stage challenges can be successful, but take our Lingjian school as an example. Cultivators of ancient sects are all carefully selected disciples with excellent qualifications, and the cultivation methods they practice are all first class in the world. There is no possibility of cross-stage challenges. If it were you, can you beat those shoot-on-stage senior brothers? This is indeed hopeless. That's why it's impossible for the elders of the Heavenly Sword Hall to surpass their realms. A gold core is a gold core. There's no way they can be compared to the other elders. Moreover, it's not just because of their cultivation, it seems like there's also a problem with their character. You see, our elders often go out to travel, but only she causes trouble every few days. Only she has been formally impeached by the third elder. Don't look at how the third elder is very strict with the sect's rules, but generally, when it comes to the final punishment, he will be lenient. The young disciple was suddenly speechless. After a while, he said, then, senior brother, what do you think will happen this time? How would I know? I am also rushing to the 4 Divisions Peak, but I really don't think so. The 2 carefree peak disciples were flying on their flying swords, so they didn't notice that the content of their conversation had been heard word for word by a successor disciple who was walking below. After listening to them, Wang Lu's heart was indeed in a bad mood. Although he often didn't like his master, but, alas, they were all residents of Non-Phase Peak. If one fell, all fell. If the 5th elder's name fell, how good could his end be? Therefore, although the 7th elder and the Western chef's words were typical of the minority, subjectively, he would rather believe the 2 people's words. Master, please be a good person. Chapter 64. Spirit Sword Hall, 4 Divisions Peak, Spirit Sword Hall. Among the 12 peaks of Spirit Sword Sect, the 4 Divisions Peak was the transportation hub with the densest concentration of shrinking arrays. At the same time, the 4 Divisions Peak was also one of the important places for the Lingjian School to receive foreign guests. This Spirit Sword Hall, which stood on the side of the square in the middle of the 4 Divisions Peak, was the place where the senior members of the sect met the foreign guests. When Wang Lu arrived at the 4 Divisions Peak, the front of the Spirit Sword Hall had been sealed off. 2 King Pill inner court disciples firmly guarded the door, like black-faced door gods. They were the favorite disciples of Uncle Lu Xian. Although they were not the successor disciples, the current successor disciples of the sect were very young, and their cultivation base was insufficient. These 2 Taoist masters of the King Pill sect were comparable to the successor disciples, so their status was not ordinary. Such a person was sent to guard the door, which was a very high-standard meeting of the Lingjian School. And the identity of the person who came to the hall to look for trouble could be imagined. He was probably not an ordinary elder of a big sect. At this time, there were 30 to 40 people gathered in front of the hall, both inner and outer court disciples. Wang Lu looked around and found a carefree peak disciple whom he was familiar with. He patted her on the shoulder. "Hello, junior sister." That young female disciple looked back and saw Wang Lu and was surprised. "Senior brother Wang Lu." She looked around and whispered, "Why are you here?"
Go back.
Wang Lu was also taken aback. "What's the matter with your attitude, as if you've just stepped on dog shit?" "Junior sister one, I've never wronged you, have I? At most, I used the giant brute's whip to scare you, yet you still hate me?" The person who was found by Wang Lu was his junior sister Wenyin, who entered the mountain at the same time. After listening to Wang Lu's accusation, the little girl frowned. "What are you talking about? I'm doing this for your own good. Do you know who's inside?" Wang Lu thought for a moment and guessed, could it be my master's lover? Mistaking me for her illegitimate son. So she came to look for trouble? When Ian was instantly stunned by his wild imagination. You are indeed master and disciple. You are equally unreliable. Let me tell you, this time, it's the people from Xueqi sect. Xueqi sect? Wang Lu frowned. Wasn't that the forever correct and always glorious big brother of the Wanxian League? Could it be that master had offended their people? I don't know the specific situation, but I heard from the senior brothers and sisters that when that Xueqi sect elder came, he was very aggressive and scary. Wang Lu thought for a moment, because my master stole his concubine. Your master is a woman, okay? Then my master stole his man? The Xueqi sect elder is a man. The innocent junior sister completely couldn't understand the true meaning of love. Seeing that Wang Lu was still pestering her endlessly, she somewhat anxiously advised, "You'd better leave quickly. This time, it's said that the matter is very big." No matter what, the other party refused to let it go. Right now, the sect leader is accompanying them in the Spirit Sword Hall. I heard that the 5th elder has been controlled by the 2nd and 3rd elder. The follow-up development is really hard to say. If you get implicated, that would be bad. Seeing Wenyin's solemn words, Wang Lu's heart sank, thinking, it's really big. In Wang Lu's impression, although his master liked to cause trouble, she was not a fool who couldn't grasp propriety. She didn't make big mistakes, but small mistakes were unceasing. She was like a graceful swallow that danced on the nerves of the second and third elder that could explode at any time. Her misdeeds for many years were not a big deal. However, this time, even an outer court disciple like Xueqi could see the problem, which showed that the matter was really not good. However, what really made Wang Lu frown was, no matter how big the trouble the fifth elder caused, she was, after all, a member of the Lingjian school. And looking at the current situation, the sect leader personally came forward to accompany them, while the second and third elder detained the criminal. What were they going to do? Decisively put righteousness before family? Although from a moral point of view, helping reason and not helping family was more noble, in today's immortal cultivation world, nobility alone could not run a big sect. Not to mention the fifth elder had just returned to the mountain for less than half a day, so it was impossible for her to clearly explain the truth of the matter. Could it be that under the pressure of the Xueqi sect, she bowed her head? While he was thinking, he suddenly saw a tall cultivator step out of the spirit sword hall. His pace seemed impatient and uneasy. After that person went out, he walked in circles in front of the door. However, with every step he took, a lot of green grass and wildflowers would grow out from the cracks on the white flagstone floor. After a few circles, the front of the Spirit Sword Hall was actually covered with greenery. Although it seemed magical, it actually showed that the cultivator was restless, unable to control the magical power within his body, which then leaked out. And what happened in the hall that could make a cultivator with a high cultivation base uneasy was even more curious. "Hey, senior brother, who is he?" Xueqi curiously looked at the tall cultivator who was walking in circles in front of the door. Since that person could come out from the Spirit Sword Hall, his status should be very high. However, that person hid his face in the hood, which made him look mysterious. Xueqi didn't remember seeing such a senior. However, how could Wang Lu not recognize that it was the seventh elder, Ao Guanhai, who was a good friend of his master? Since the optimistic and cheerful Uncle Black could be agitated like this, it was self-evident what happened in the Spirit Sword Hall. And just at this time, Ao Guanhai also noticed Wang Lu. "Wang Lu, you're here too?" Uncle Black's voice appeared in Wang Lu's mind without warning. If a Yuaning stage Taoist master wanted to talk to someone, he didn't need to open his mouth. With his powerful primordial spirit, with just a thought, he could directly invade the other party's consciousness. However, at this time, what Ao Guanhai used didn't involve the primordial spirit's power, but a simple sound transmission spell. This spell was a two-way communication, so as long as Wang Lu thought about the response in his mind, he could directly reply back. However, this time, Uncle Black didn't give him the opportunity to speak, and immediately poured out his grievances. "It seems like you also know. Alas, the Xueqi sect people are really overbearing." As soon as they entered the mountain, they yelled and shouted for the sect leader to hand over the person. Later on, the sect leader came forward to negotiate with him, but without any evidence, he framed fifth senior sister and forced our Lingjian school to bow our head. Simply unreasonable. But senior brother still wanted to negotiate with him. Really, what's there to negotiate with? If you ask me, we should expel that rude and unreasonable person from the sect. What's wrong with Xueqi sect? Do you think they can be unreasonable? But senior brother is not willing, and even tried to talk nicely to them, and even entertain them with Green Mountain Mist tea. Obviously, last time when fifth senior sister picked a few caddies, she was scolded by the third elder for a long time, but now, she actually entertained a bad guest. Simply alas. As a result, before he could finish his words, a sigh came from inside the hall, interrupting the two people's sound transmission. "Junior brother, come in." Ao Guanhai seriously shook his head. "Senior brother, you're now on the side of appeasement and compromise. I'm determined not to be on your side." The sect leader was both angry and amused. "What kind of strange words did you learn from fifth junior sister? Who's appeasing and compromise? All right, quickly come in. Don't let the disciples outside see you as a joke." With that, an invisible but irresistible force pulled Ao Guanhai back. As for the disciples outside the hall, Naturally, they were talking about it, but they didn't get the gist of it, so they could only speculate. Wen Yin's gossipy spirit was also burning. The girl's eyes shone as she turned around and asked, "Senior brother Wang Lu, what do you think?" "Hey, senior brother Wang Lu." Wang Lu had long run away. At this time, in the Spirit Sword Hall, many elders of the Lingjian school had gathered, sitting side by side on one side of the hall. On the other side, there was only one person. That person was tall, with white hair and a youthful face. Facing the several Spirit Sword elders, there was a hint of arrogance in his eyes. Behind him, two young disciples quietly stood, not saying a word. Before long, that person slowly opened his mouth and asked, "It's been a long time. I wonder what your sect's decision is." His voice was aggressive, especially when he unscrupulously glanced at them, which was even more rude. The several elders looked somewhat unhappy, but sect leader Feng Yin indifferently chuckled. "Taoist Master Jifeng, there are some things that still need to be verified. Please don't be impatient." Taoist Master Jifeng's eyes flashed. "Still need to be verified?" "Feng Yin, Taoist Master, you said that 4 hours ago, and now you're still saying it. It's an obvious fact. Why do you need to verify it for so long? I think you guys just want to cover up." Before he could finish, a hooded elder from the Lingjian school couldn't help but say, "Whether it's obvious or not, it's not up to you alone to decide." Taoist Master Jifeng sneered. "You don't even dare to show your face in public, yet you want to cooperate with me? Inferior people are really unbearable." Upon hearing this remark, the several Lingjian school elders simultaneously stood up. Taoist Master Jifeng, however, wasn't afraid at all. Instead, he sternly asked, "Do you guys want to bully us because we are few in number?" "Ha, what are you talking about, Taoist Master Jifeng?" Feng Yin Taoist Master laughed, motioned his junior brothers to sit down, and then said, "How could you dare to bully us?" Taoist Master Jifeng is a senior elder of the Shungjing sect. His visit to our Spirit Sword sect represents the Shungjing sect, the leader of the Immortal Cultivation sect. Our two sects are both part of the 5 uniques of the Union of 10,000 Immortals, so how could we bully each other? "One of the 5 uniques?"
Ha!
Taoist Master Jifeng squeezed out a sneer from his nostrils. "Very well, for the time being, I'll still consider your Lingjian school as one of the 5 uniques of the Wanxian League. But since you said we're one of the 5 uniques, then I'd like to ask, your sect's elder came to pick a fight, destroyed my Shungjing sect's division in the White Moon Country, and even spread malicious rumors to ruin my sect's reputation. Is this the way of being one of the 5 uniques?" Feng Yin Taoist Master let out a laugh and was ready to fool him. However, the youngest elder, Hua Yun, couldn't help but say, "Humph, whether it's a rumor or not, you know it in your heart."
Ha!
Taoist Master Jifeng flew into a rage. "This is the result of your verification? It seems like you guys are going to cover up to the end." As soon as he finished speaking, a fierce and valiant aura assaulted them. The complexion of the several Lingjian school elders changed. However, the sect leader Feng Yin chuckled and said, "Taoist Master Jifeng, please don't be impatient. Our result will soon come out, and when the time comes, we'll give you an explanation." Taoist Master Jifeng sneered and was about to say something, but he found out that Feng Yin's eyes behind the glasses were staring at him. Unexpectedly, his body was somewhat out of control. Taoist Master Jifeng's jade mansion suddenly trembled. He swept it with his divine sense, but didn't find anything unusual. Was it an illusion? However, in this moment of daze, Taoist Master Jifeng knew that the opportunity had passed. He clenched his teeth.
Ew.
"Very well. I'll wait for you for a quarter of an hour." "Haha, Taoist Master Jifeng, why are you in such a hurry? There's no harm in waiting for a while. Come, serve the tea." Chapter 65. At the same time, in the Heavenly Policy Hall of the Spirit Sword Mountain.
Oh.
Is the above the whole thing? Sitting in the middle of the Heavenly Policy Hall, the second elder of the Lingjian school, Lu Xian, slowly wrote on the sincerity paper with a green bamboo pen. He then looked up and asked the person standing in front of the hall. Being stared at by the reward giver elder's deep gaze, the person in front of the hall indifferently smiled. Not everything, after all. We need to keep some personal privacy. But that's the main thing. Alas. Lu Xian sighed and picked up the thick stack of sincerity paper on the table. If that's the case, then things are really troublesome. Beside Lu Xian, the disciplinary elder Fong, he coldly humphed. Troublesome? That's also their trouble. Who would have thought that the dignified Xinjing sect would actually do such a dirty thing? Colluding with the mortal world's government to deceive ignorant people, selling low-quality spirit root at a high price to swindle money, and even secretly conducting human experiments. This is clearly the method of the devil's path. Lu Xian sighed. Junior brother Fong, don't get excited. This matter is only done by the Xinjing sect's division in a small country. It's just a small matter, so it shouldn't rise to the height of the devil's path. Fong immediately indignantly said, Senior brother, why do you say that? Whether it's the headquarters or the division, even if the scale is small, isn't it the Xinjing sect signboard? The people below do whatever they want. Don't tell me that Darin isn't responsible for not being strict enough? Not to mention that a mere division actually drew out a Yuanying stage elder. Senior brother, can't you see the problem behind this? Moreover, if this kind of disregard for human life is not the devil's path, then what is the devil's path? Must one personally kill until blood flows like a river to be considered as the devil's path? Lu Xian wryly smiled. Junior brother, if things go according to your understanding, then we can't just leave it at that. Moreover, right now, this is only our Lingjian school's word. How can you win people's trust? The Xinjing sect's division in the White Moon country colluding with the mortal world's government. Who would believe this kind of thing? Junior brother, weren't you also shocked at first and even wanted junior sister to make a great heart demon oath? Fong choked for a moment. He looked at his senior brother, who was smiling bitterly, and then looked at his fifth junior sister, who was smiling cheekily next to him. His face was somewhat embarrassed as he said, Alas, although junior sister is usually misbehaving, it's impossible for her to joke about this kind of thing. I still trust her. As a result, before the fifth junior sister could jump up and cheer, Fong roared, Don't be too proud. I can trust the outside world, but that doesn't mean I can trust the inside world. After dealing with that Jifeng, I will definitely not be lenient when it comes to impeaching you. Holy **T. Are you serious? Waving his hand to interrupt the quarrel between the martial sister and martial brother, Lu Xian sighed. Junior brother, you're willing to believe in junior sister. That's very good. However, it's useless for us to only trust each other. This time, junior sister impulsively destroyed the Xinjing sect's division head, which is actually giving people a handle. Why do you think that Jifeng came looking for us? He's very self-righteous. Fong said, I don't need to care about his wishful thinking. No matter how much reason he has, could it be that it's greater than the heaven's justice? In my opinion, this time, fifth junior sister did a very good job. Seeing injustice on the road, why worry too much? Enforcing justice on behalf of the heaven's justice, no matter where you are, you can be self-confident. You don't need to think twice. The fifth junior sister was in high spirits. Oh yeah, justice will prevail. Fong turned his head to the fifth junior sister and roared, You better be honest with me. Doing well doesn't mean doing right. Just wait for your impeachment. Holy **T, senior brother, are you a genius or a tsundere? Lu Xian sighed and no longer paid attention to this pair of martial sister and martial brother's quarrel. When he gave the position of disciplinary elder to junior brother Fong it was because he fancied Fong who regarded the rules as the most important thing. Even if the sect leader did something wrong, he would still reprimand him and would never let his heart be wronged. However, in the end, with this kind of character, he could only be the disciplinary elder, enforcing the law internally. If he did the same thing externally, it would absolutely not work. To talk about reason, the facts recorded on the sincerity paper were indeed the hard truth. This time, when the fifth junior sister went out to wander, in the White Moon country, she saw the Shungjing sex division doing all kinds of evil. Therefore, for various reasons, she directly destroyed the division and even injured some people. In the entire Wanxian League, there was no unified law enforcement organization, and there was no universally recognized law enforcement rules. This was completely understandable and even idealistic, worthy of encouragement. However, the reality was not that simple. Your heroic sword was indeed refreshing, but all the evidence has also been destroyed. Right now, the only thing that could prove everything was the stack of sincerity paper that was dictated by the fifth junior sister. This thing could win the trust of their own people, but it was worthless in the outside world. However, that being said, Lu Xian didn't think that he should blame anyone. With the fifth junior sister's character, she usually would not meddle in the affairs of the mortal world. This time, her action was so fierce, so obviously, there was a reason for it. Moreover, if she didn't say it, perhaps no one could make her say it. In any case, the key facts were already very clear. Next, it was up to the sect leader to decide. After verifying the situation with the parties involved, the second elder and the third elder left the Heavenly Policy Hall with the stack of precious sincerity paper and flew toward the Four Divisions Peak. With the information in his hand, Lu Xian knew that once he left, he wouldn't be able to give up. But so what? The Lingjian school didn't want to stir up trouble, but they were also never afraid of trouble. If someone knew the difficulty and retreated, then that would be good for everyone. Otherwise, the Heavenly Sword Hall elders haven't exercised their muscles and bones for a long time. On the other side, the fifth elder regained her freedom. According to Lu Xian's words, other than the Four Divisions Peak, she could go wherever she wanted. The reason was simple enough. Letting this guy go to the Four Divisions Peak and confront Taoist Master Jifeng was like a bolt from the blue. If they didn't kill each other, it wouldn't be over. Although the fifth junior sister was by no means an evil person, with her mischievous and tasteless style of doing things, sometimes she was more troublesome than a villain. When the bored fifth elder walked out of the Heavenly Policy Hall after being interrogated, she saw her beloved disciple, Wang Lu, waiting outside the door. On his head was a triangular hat, around his neck was a colorful wreath, and in his hand, there was a small firework that no one knew where he got it from. When Wang Lu saw his master outside the door, his face lit up, and with a bang sound, he lit the firework in his hand and put it in the sky. Congratulations, Master, for once again stirring up trouble and bringing disaster to the sect. I hope you can retire from the elder position as soon as possible and live a carefree life. Haha. The fifth elder suddenly jumped 3 feet high. What the hell? You evil disciple. You want a rebel? Wang Lu very firmly nodded his head. I have specifically inquired about it. Although there is no specific provision in the sect's rules for those successor disciples who lost their elder position because of their master's crimes, the sect will appoint a new elder to take their place. So, Master, please go in peace. Xueqi, I won't go anywhere. I still have to receive the sect elder's allowance for 10,000 years. The master said somewhat exasperatedly, but at the same time, he was resentful of Wang Lu for failing to meet his expectations. Moreover, who told you that I stirred up trouble? I obviously saw injustice and pulled out my sword to help, okay? Wang Lu thought for a while. On your way down the mountain, you saw a prostitute, so you pulled out your sword and threatened her. After you had sex with her, her family came to find you? You really have no confidence in me at all. Wang Lu smiled. I only have confidence in Master's ability to break the limit. Don't worry, one day, you will surpass your master. The fifth elder's interest waned. Alas, since ancient times, sages have always been lonely. Seeing that his master seemed to really be in a bad mood, Wang Lu also became curious. While taking off his triangular hat and colorful wreath, he asked, what actually happened? Actually, it's nothing. This time, when I went down the mountain to refine medicine, when I passed by the White Moon country, I found out that there's a newly established Thousand Spirit sect. Originally, the 9 regions is very big, and there are many immortal cultivation sects, so the rise and fall of this kind of small sect is not worth paying attention to. However, their banner in a certain country is very strange, so people couldn't help but pay attention to it. Mortal Cultivation Sect. Wang Lu laughed in spite of himself.
What's so strange about that?
Nowadays, in the mortal world, there are countless groups of swindlers. Before I went up the mountain, I met a 7 stars sect in my hometown. They used a few 6 harmonies pills to swindle money and women. However, the 5th elder seriously shook her head. It's not that simple. The kind of sect that you mentioned can only be popular in some remote mountain villages. Once they reach the bustling city, the citizens are more knowledgeable, so these tricks can't be deceived. However, the Thousand Spirit sect that I saw is different. They directly developed their business in the White Moon country's capital, and then radiated their influence through the big cities to the remote mountain villages. Their way of doing things is high-end. Wang Lu was surprised. This White Moon country, I remember it's just a small country, but in the capital, there should be some capable people who can see through the scam, right? The 5th elder sneered. Yes, there are indeed capable people, including the White Moon country's royal consecrated low-level cultivators and Xiantian stage martial artists. In the past, they have also seen through some low-level scams. However, this time, because of their existence, things have become worse. Because in the White Moon country, the people who spared no effort to wave the flag for the Thousand Spirit sect are precisely this group of capable people. With the guarantee of these people, the Thousand Spirit sect's development in the White Moon country is in full swing, unstoppable. And the reason why these people support the Thousand Spirit sect is very simple, because they have personally experienced the Thousand Spirit sect's immortal cultivation method, and they have really benefited from it. It is said that a certain peak foundation establishment stage cultivator, who was conferred the title of state preceptor by the White Moon country, had a breakthrough in one fell swoop, reaching the Shidon stage. At that time, I felt that it was strange, and I thought, could it be that artificial spirit roots have really made a breakthrough here? So I went deeper to investigate, and as a result, I really found something good. The 5th elder said that it was something good, but her expression and tone were completely different. And very quickly, she revealed the answer to the mystery, which was really frightening. It's the heaven-burning blood technique. As a top student, Wang Lu was the first to react. What the hell is that the life-breaking divine art? That's right, it's that demonic technique that uses Xiantian lifespan to exchange for power. The Thousand Spirit sect's development in the White Moon country is actually very simple. They use a large number of low-level artificial spirit roots to guide mortals to cross the threshold of cultivation, and then use the heaven-burning blood technique to provide the energy needed to advance in cultivation. Those cultivators see that their cultivation speed is very fast, but they don't realize that they are rushing towards death, thinking that they have gained a huge advantage. Wang Lu frowned. I heard that the effect of that life-breaking divine technique is extremely overbearing. For the Thousand Spirit sect to be so popular, they should have already plunged into misery and suffering, so how could they develop so fast? Of course, it's not the original version of the heaven-burning blood technique, or else it's interesting, the technique that the Thousand Spirit sect spread in the White Moon country has been improved by an expert, so the conversion rate of Xiantian lifespan is much higher. Moreover, it also has a limit, so it won't directly drain the cultivators dry. At most, the cultivators will feel weak, and they can recover after resting for 2 days. Moreover, as the cultivators' cultivation level increases, their Xiantian lifespan will also continue to increase. Some talented cultivators can even offset the consumption of their lifespan, so naturally, they won't feel any abnormalities. Wang Lu asked, since it has been improved, isn't that good? Good my ass, if this kind of evil method was really effective, then there would be no need for serious cultivators in the world. Once you encounter a bottleneck, you can burn a few years of your Xiantian lifespan to steadily pass it. How could there be such a cheap thing? Why do you think this heaven-burning blood technique is called a demonic method? That's because the seemingly perfect cultivation base is actually a castle on the beach, easily collapsing. Even if the cultivation technique is improved and the lifespan consumption is reduced, the essence of this cultivation technique hasn't changed. There's no future for it at all. Whoever cultivates it is an idiot. Regarding the topic of cultivating the mind, Fifth Elder was generally quite serious. At this time, after fiercely criticizing the heaven-burning blood technique, she simply gave a qualitative evaluation. As an audience member, although Wang Lu was the top student of the Spirit Sword sect, he obviously couldn't compare to his master in terms of cultivation, so he nodded and accepted this point of view. However, Master, with your character, after knowing the truth, at most, you would laugh at them for being stupid and ignorant. You probably wouldn't take the initiative to help them, right? Fifth Elder confidently nodded. Of course, what does the life and death of those idiots in the White Moon country have to do with me? Even if the whole country's people were sacrificed, I would just dip my steamed bun in their blood. Therefore, at that time, I just called them idiots and turned around to leave. Wang Lu was surprised. Then how did it lead to so many troubles? Fifth Elder thought for a moment and then replied, perhaps it has something to do with the occasion? At that time, I scolded them at the headquarters of the Thousand Spirit sect. Then, there was a sect leader who came out to scold me, saying how ignorant and foolish I was, that I would suffer the wrath of the heavens and so on. I was too lazy to talk nonsense with him and just wanted to see who's the real deal. That good-for-nothing only has the cultivation level of King Pill, so I let him use his 2 hands, 2 legs, and a pair of beautiful breasts. Even in his human stick form, I still easily won against him. As a result, after I beat the young one, the old one came out, and then a peak King Pill sect leader popped out. I don't know why this guy especially likes the sect leader, but in any case, since he wants to fight with me, then I'll accompany him. As a result, this peak King Pill sect leader was not much stronger than the sect leader, so I easily won in my human stick form. However, after I won against this sect leader, a certain Yuanying stage cultivator from Xueqi sect couldn't sit still. While talking, Fifth Elder sneered. Oh, he, what happened after that? Needless to say, Wang Lu could already guess it. Because his master caused too much trouble at the headquarters of the Thousand Spirit sect, forcing the Xueqi sect, who was behind the scenes, to appear, things would inevitably develop in this direction. Wang Lu quickly sorted out the things in his mind and couldn't help but sigh. The Xueqi sect has brought this upon themselves for not being strict, but I really didn't expect that Master also has a chivalrous heart. Fifth Elder gawked. She didn't expect her disciple to give her such an evaluation. Hey, what does this have to do with chivalrous? I've already told you, I'm just laughing at them for being stupid. I don't have the mind to care about the life and death of the ignorant people of the White Moon country. With that, seeing the faint smile on Wang Lu's face, Fifth Elder snorted, stepped on her bamboo sword, and flew away, no longer wasting her breath. Chapter 66. After his master left, Wang Lu still somewhat sighed with emotion. It's really not something she would do. However, as soon as he finished speaking, he heard a girl behind him coldly snorted. You're prejudiced. Wang Lu turned his head with a smile. He was not surprised by the sudden appearance of the lady boss. This incompetent innkeeper ran her Ru family in like a dead dog. In addition to wandering around the mountain, what else could she do? Therefore, in the Spirit Sword Mountain, it was not unusual to meet her. Not to mention that his master was in trouble this time. As a sisterly person, she must come to see her. Hearing her speak for his master, Wang Lu shrugged. Not to mention others, there are hundreds of people in the Lingjian school. How many of them don't have prejudice against her? Alas, Wang Wu, that fool, does things as she pleases and especially likes to make mischief, so she deserves to be misunderstood. But you're her successor disciple, so there's no need for you to make a fuss with other ignorant people, right? Also, she must have her reasons for being like this. Wang Lu deeply frowned. Is the source of her difficulties the justice and axiom of this world? Hey, she's still your master. Seeing that Wang Lu was too prejudiced, Phone Ling. Well, if she respected her own opinion, it would be Little Ling heir. Out of sisterhood, she earnestly explained to Wang Lu. I won't talk about other things. Let's start with the non-phase method that you're currently cultivating. You've now reached a small success in the non-phase sword bone. How do you feel? Wang Lu sneered and was about to open his mouth when he was interrupted by Little Ling heir. Speak with your conscience. Very well, although the effect is extreme, it is undeniable that this is a very outstanding cultivation method. Although I haven't cultivated the other cultivation methods of my sect, I know that this non-phase sword bone alone is probably the best in the immortal cultivation world. Little Ling heir nodded. That's true. But in terms of the effect, at least in terms of defensive ability, it's almost unparalleled in the immortal cultivation world. So you should also know how much effort she put into this method, revising it more than 100 times. It sounds like a joke, but without great perseverance, it's absolutely impossible to reach this step. Yes, I can understand. No, actually, you don't really understand her difficulties. She has been through hundreds of years to develop her non-phase method to its present stage is certainly admirable, but among the 10 elders of the Lingjian school, why is she the only one who cultivates a self-created method? In terms of aptitude, could it be that she was stronger than the sect leader's star spiritual root? In terms of perception, could she compare to the 4th elder's brilliant sword heart? Those talented people have never created their own skills, so why should she be different? Wang Lu thought for a moment. Because you have no other choice? That's right. She doesn't have a choice at all. Let's not talk about comprehension and opportunities for now. Her spirit root is actually only of the 5th grade, and it doesn't belong to the 5 elements. It's just a mutated spirit root. She was able to enter Lingjian school because of various coincidences and her own hard work. However, if she wants to progress on the path of cultivation, Lingjian school can't help her much. She can only rely on herself. Little Ling heir sighed. With this set of non-phase method, she constantly made breakthroughs on the path of cultivation and eventually even sat firmly in the position of elder of the Heavenly Sword Hall. But in fact, to reach her current position, she has to spend more effort than others for every step forward. Why does she hate the heaven-burning blood technique so much? Because compared to the bumpy road of her cultivation, the kind of method that claims to be able to soar her cultivation base by burning a few years of her lifespan is simply an insult to the immortal path. Hearing you say that, I suddenly feel that Master's image is a lot taller and more powerful. Little Ling heir bitterly smiled. Actually, it's a lot more bitter. Do you know, although the non-phase method has endless wonderful uses and can even make her, who has a 5th grade spirit root, the peak of the king pill, but the consumption required for cultivation is several times or even dozens of times more than other cultivators. For example, the 8th layer of the non-phase sword bone is only the end of the body refining stage and the starting point of the qi cultivating stage. But do you know how much the non-phase bone improving pill is worth? Wang Lu gawked. He really didn't calculate it carefully, because this non-phase bone-improving pill was invented by his master herself. Not to mention that it didn't have a grade. He didn't even know the formula. He only knew that the main ingredient was the vermilion fruit and the value of the vermilion fruit. Xueqi. Doesn't that mean I ate at least a few thousand spirit stones in a month? Little Ling heir said, yes, you're only at the 8th layer, but Wang Wu has more than 100 layers. So you should understand why she's so poor, right? Xueqi. Poor and destitute, yet she still drinks wine every day. 500 spirit stones for a pot of spirit spring wine. She should go sell her body, okay? Because at that time, she needed spirit wine to nourish her qi. Otherwise, do you think a poor ghost like her deserves to drink wine? She couldn't even bear to buy herself a new set of clothes, okay? She only has one set of clothes on her body. Wang Lu suddenly felt as if he was struck by lightning. If that was really the case, then before she went out to wander, he quietly stole her original underwear. Then, during her wander, wouldn't it be? No wonder her character is so violent that she would hit anyone she sees. A vacuum woman is always not easy to deal with. Spirit Sword Mountain for Division's Peak, Spirit Sword Hall. Wearing a cyan gown, Daoist Master Jifeng has been waiting in the lobby for quite some time. It has been half an hour since the last time he issued the ultimatum. The verification result of Lingjian School has yet to be delivered. However, Jifeng himself didn't feel surprised at all. On the contrary, although the bottom line has been broken again and again, he has been waiting more and more leisurely. Lingjian School's delay could only mean that they are also hesitant on how to deal with this diplomatic dispute. Regarding this so-called Wanxian League's 5 uniques, the longer they hesitate, the higher the possibility of them giving in. This was also Daoist Master Jifeng's many years of experience in dealing with other sections. This set of tricks was not new. As the leader of the 9 regions' immortal cultivation path, Shungjing sect's influence has spread all over the 9 regions. Needless to say, their headquarters in the central region, even in a relatively remote place like the Blue River region, there was a Shungjing sect branch. With such a wide range of development, naturally, there would inevitably be friction with other local forces. Daoist Master Jifeng, as the person in charge of the southern region of the Blue River region, has dealt with many big and small sect disputes. He has personally appeared more than 10 times. And almost every time, it was the same rhythm. As long as he aggressively pounced on the other side would naturally concede. This has nothing to do with reason but with strength. Of course, it was not because of Daoist Master Jifeng's Yuanying stage strength, but because of the Shungjing sect's glittering signboard. In fact, more than 5 years ago, when he was temporarily transferred to the Southern Heaven region, he had a friction with the local Beast Master School. Daoist Master Jifeng single-handedly broke into the sect's main altar and confronted several Yuanying stage sect elders, as well as more than 10 King Pill elders. Obviously, his strength was far inferior to the other side, but in the end, he forced the Beast Master School to concede. This was all because of the Shungjing sect. Now, it seemed like this trick was not only effective against the 3rd or 4th rank sects like the Beast Master School, but also against the Lingjian School, one of the 5 uniques. Of course, if it wasn't necessary, Daoist Master Jifeng really didn't want to provoke this ancient sect. 100 years ago, the golden generation of the Lingjian School came into being. It was simply a gathering of heroes, and no one doubted that in another 100 or 200 years, the Lingjian School would have the qualification to keep pace with the Shungjing sect. Unfortunately, the sudden change almost destroyed this thousands of years-old sect. More than 100 talented disciples fell one after another, leaving behind only the 10 elders of the Heavenly Sword Hall, and the sect leader with the highest cultivation base was only at the deity stage. However, the Shungjing sect had evaluated the Lingjian School. Although because this sect was too low-key, the evaluation result was very uncertain, at least one thing was without a doubt. The sect leader Feng Yin could not be regarded as an ordinary deity stage cultivator. He might as well be regarded as a genuine unity stage cultivator. As for the rest of the peak Yuanying stage elders, it was not too conservative to treat them as deity stage cultivators. Therefore, with his mere 4th level Yuanying stage cultivation, he simply didn't have the qualification to be presumptuous in the Spirit Sword Hall. The only thing he could rely on was the Shungjing sect signboard. And this signboard was very useful for 2nd or 3rd-rate sects like the Beast Master School. As for the Lingjian School, actually, before he came here, he wasn't very confident. Unfortunately, even if he didn't have the confidence, he still had to come. The change in the White Moon country had forced him into a dead end. If he didn't charge forward, he would fall into the abyss, beyond redemption. Because the truth was indeed like what the young elder of the Lingjian School said, he was very clear about it. In the White Moon country, he supported the puppet sect, used a crooked method to lure a large number of mortals to take the artificial spirit root, and then used the improved version of the heaven-burning blood method to stimulate their cultivation base, creating the illusion that mortals could also cultivate to immortality to incite more people. Each of these things he was very clear about it. The one who manipulated everything behind the scenes was him. And the reason for this was very simple. He needed materials, a lot of materials, to support an important experiment. Once the experiment was completed, He could become the greatest inventor or improver of the Xueqi sect in the last 100 years, which was exactly what he urgently needed. He didn't know when it started, but he could no longer smoothly advance on the path of immortal cultivation. 4th level Yuanying stage. The last time he advanced his cultivation base seemed to be 100 years ago. Taoist Master Jifeng was very clear that this was the bottleneck of talent. After all, he couldn't compare to those monstrous geniuses in the sect. He had already reached his limit. However, this limit was far from enough. In other places, perhaps a 4th level Yuanying stage cultivation base could be regarded as amazing, but in the Xueqi sect, there were a lot of people who were stronger than him. Especially in the last 10 years, some genius cultivators advanced by leaps and bounds, which made him feel a deep threat. He was now an elder of the sect, assigned to the Blue River region to be in charge of half of the region's territory. Although he was not as prominent as his fellow disciples in the central region, he could still be regarded as a real power. Especially in the remote mountains, it seemed that he could be at ease as a local tyrant. However, in fact, in a sect that advocated competition, survival of the fittest, any kind of complacency with the status quo was a precursor to being eliminated. Especially among the younger generation disciples, there were already many who covetously eyed his position. Although their cultivation base was far from his, the Xueqi sect was usually more willing to use those who were determined to make progress. In order to keep his position, Taoist Master Jifeng racked his brains. However, the bottleneck of his cultivation base was like a natural moat that could not be broken. Therefore, he racked his brains, which led to that scene in the White Moon country. Taoist Master Jifeng wasn't good at other things, but in the research of artificial spirit root, he was very good at it. Unfortunately, because of the lack of materials, although he was full of theories, he was unable to make a substantial breakthrough. But now, in the White Moon country, the sect rules absolutely forbade him. However, if he eventually achieved results in his research, then after reporting it, the sect would usually turn a blind eye to some side effects. However, now is not a good time to expose himself. There was still some distance before the final result, and he simply couldn't come up with any convincing evidence. What's worse was, that bitch from the Lingjian school had caused too much of a stir. Once this matter was spread out, the Xueqi sect's reputation would suffer a blow, and he wouldn't be able to redeem himself even if he died 100 times. Therefore, the only thing he could do was to preemptively strike before things got worse. With the Xueqi sect's power, he would overwhelm all the unstable factors in the Lingjian school and bury the truth of the matter forever. There was no such thing as heaven-burning blood technique, and of course, there was no such thing as a record of a mortal's cultivation to immortality. What he had was just a scam set up by a cult organization in the White Moon country, which was eventually seen through by the Xueqi sect's division leader, Taoist Master Jifeng. As for a certain spirit sword sect elders claim that the Xueqi sect colluded with the cult and the government, that was, of course, nonsense. He wanted the Lingjian school to publicly apologize for this. Of course, realistically speaking, he might as well relax the conditions a bit. For example, the Xueqi sect and the Lingjian school jointly discovered the truth, jointly destroyed the cult organization, and saved hundreds of thousands of innocent people in the White Moon country. As for the previous statement from a certain elder, it was just a momentary misunderstanding. This plan was undoubtedly more realistic. However, only by asking for a sky-high price would he be able to return the money. Taoist Master Jifeng absolutely didn't want people to see through his bottom line, therefore, he was aggressive. While he was thinking about the next step, a burst of footsteps came from outside the hall. Taoist Master Jifeng turned his head and saw the number 2 and number 3 figures of the Lingjian school walking hand in hand. Among them, the second elder, Lu Xian, was holding a stack of sincerity papers with a solemn expression. Chapter 67. Seeing the second and third elders of the Lingjian school enter the door, Taoist Master Jifeng gawked for a moment, But then he realized that the Lingjian school's verification results had finally come out. After dragging on for so long, the final result should be as he expected. The Lingjian school chose to compromise and didn't let the fifth elder come forward, which should be to avoid trouble, turning a big problem into a small one. However, somehow, the two elders Lu Xian and Fong He's solemn faces always made his heart somewhat uneasy. Lu Xian, holding the sincerity paper, slowly walked in front of Feng Yin Taoist master, wanting to hand over the final verification materials to the sect leader for review. However, Feng Yin waved his hand. No need, just give it to Taoist Master Jifeng for review. The corner of Lu Xian's mouth suddenly revealed an imperceptible smile, but unfortunately, Taoist Master Jifeng didn't see it. When he received the stack of sincerity paper, Taoist Master Jifeng had already predicted the final result. The sect leader didn't even look at the stack of materials, which obviously meant that he had given in. That being the case, with a trace of a smile, Taoist Master Jifeng turned his eyes to the sincerity paper. However, with just a glance, his expression immediately froze. The next moment, Taoist Master Jifeng's hands began to involuntarily tremble, and his originally pale complexion was flushed with anger. Everything that happened in the White Moon country was recorded on it without any concealment. Not only the fact that the Thousand Spirit sect colluded with the White Moon country's local government was recorded, even the fact that the Thousand Spirit sect colluded with the White Moon country's palace servants to control the members of the royal family was also exposed. This was not a joke. Although the Thousand Spirit sect was only an insignificant faction, it was a big taboo for an immortal cultivator to arbitrarily interfere in the mortal world's politics. Once it was investigated, as the backer, he simply wouldn't be able to hide. Of course, some people might ask which of the big sects in the Wanxian League had nothing to do with the mortal world's politics. For example, the Xungjing sect that was entrenched in the central region clearly controlled many countries, so what taboo was this? The correct answer was, if you were as powerful as the Xungjing sect, you could also ignore this taboo. In fact, among the top-ranking sects in the Wanxian League, other than the Lingjian school who kept a low profile, the other sects would more or less control some mortal countries to provide the necessary resources. Among them, Xungjing sect's expansion was the strongest. They even set up a continent-wide hegemony strategy. They had branches all over the 9 continents and had unclear connections with countless countries. However, the problem was that all of these connections were in the hands of the main altar of the immortal sect in the Middle Continent. The people in charge of the branch were not allowed to act on their own. Of course, in a place far away from the emperor, it wasn't a big deal if they wanted to make some money. However, to do what the Thousand Spirit sect had done, it had far exceeded the bottom line of tolerance. With his own qualifications, he was far from being able to suppress this matter. When the time came, the sect rules would be like a mountain, and he thinking to this, Taoist Master Jifeng's jade mansion trembled, his yuanying flickered, and cold sweat gushed out of his body like a spring. He almost couldn't hold the sincerity paper in his hand. A moment later, Taoist Master Jifeng converged his primordial spirit and used his supreme heart to suppress the vibration of his nascent soul. Then, the fear and panic disappeared, replaced by endless anger. Lingjian school, you forced me to do this. You guys are, after gritting his teeth and squeezing out a few words, Taoist Master Jifeng angrily stood up and loudly roared, you guys really want to cover up to the end? What a joke. Foaming Taoist Master's smile suddenly turned cold. Cover up? Only when you've made a mistake can you talk about covering up. Now that the facts are clear, Junior Sister's chivalrous act is not only not wrong, but also meritorious. How could we cover up such a person, Taoist Master Jifeng? So, what if it's written on a piece of paper? Do you think it counts? Taoist Master Jifeng didn't back down as he roared back at the deity stage sect leader. You guys have your own people, your own paper, isn't what you write the same thing? The angrier Taoist Master Jifeng was, the more leisurely Feng Yin Taoist Master became. Yes, it's the same thing. However, Taoist Master Jifeng, you claim that fifth junior sister maliciously slandered you. Isn't that also the same thing? Or, do you have clear evidence to prove something? Taoist Master Jifeng was stunned. Of course, he didn't have any evidence. Are you kidding me? Does the Shengjing sect still need evidence? The leader of the Wanxian League was the biggest evidence. However, at this time, Feng Yin Taoist master changed his previous attitude of knowing that he was a good friend of the Shengjing sect. Taoist Master Jifeng was suddenly at a loss. However, he quickly found an attack point. Just now, you didn't even look at that material, yet you know what's written on it. Do you dare to say that there's nothing more to it? Feng Yin Taoist master lightly said, "Why would I need to look at what's written on it? From the beginning, I have complete trust in my junior sister. This stack of paper is written for you to see, not for us to see. I believe that any elder in the Heavenly Sword Hall would not doubt their own junior sister."
Ha ha ha.
The nearby hooded elder couldn't help but laugh. I told you, senior brother sect leader, you will not let us down. The youngest female elder repeatedly nodded. Yes, although fifth senior sister is cold and ungrateful, I absolutely trust her. Sixth elder Luli said, "Oh, in the past, she has helped me a lot. Although she has a lot of problems, she is a trustworthy senior sister." Fourth elder Zhoming said with a smile, "I second that." Seeing that several of his junior brothers and sisters have expressed their stance, the third elder Feng, he awkwardly hesitated for a long time, unable to speak. Although they had expressed their stance in the Heavenly Policy Hall, at that time there were only 3 people in the hall, and at this time they were surrounded by so many junior brothers and sisters, which was really... The nearby Lu Xian somewhat laughingly patted his shoulder, and then said, "Everyone knows that my relationship with fifth junior sister is the worst. Almost every month, I would complain about her 2 or 3 times. However, this time, I completely trust junior sister." Finally, Feng He reluctantly said, "I also believe her, okay? As long as she can change her bad habits and abide by the sect's rules." The voice behind him became smaller and smaller, and no one cared about what he said. The attitude of the Heavenly Sword Hall was so obvious that there was no possibility of mediation. Taoist Master Jifeng gritted his teeth. Even if this means becoming enemies with the Shengjing sect. Just for a king pill elder? Ha ha ha. Feng Yin Taoist Master suddenly looked up to the sky and laughed. Taoist Master Jifeng, you should ask your Shengjing sect. Are you, the leader of the Immortal Path, really ready to be the enemy of our Spirit Sword sect? Just for a mere 4th level Yuanying stage like you? When the last word came out, Feng Yin Taoist Master's anger surged up. In a split second, the entire Spirit Sword mountain trembled. Facing this pressure, Taoist Master Jifeng's vision turned black and he almost lost consciousness. Damn, I've kicked an iron plate. When he regained his composure, Taoist Master Jifeng's complexion was miserable. He knew that his wishful thinking had been completely broken. Sure enough, the 5 Uniques and the Beast Master School could not be mentioned in the same breath. Even if everyone thought that they were unworthy of their name, strong on the outside but weak on the inside. However, the 5 Uniques were indeed the 5 Uniques. Behind their great reputation was a very deep sect heritage. However, things haven't reached a dead end yet. On the contrary, at this time, he had to persevere to the end, because this matter was not only about him, but also the confrontation between the 2 sects. The matter in the White Moon country had been exposed, and he was doomed to be punished by the sect. However, the research results that he had in his hands might be able to offset part of the punishment. The problem was, at present, he was representing the Shengjing sect in the confrontation with the Lingjian school. Once he retreated, it would bring disgrace to the sect's reputation, which would make him feel extremely uncomfortable. On the contrary, if he could stubbornly insist on this matter and escalate it into a battle of reputation between the 2 sects, perhaps he would be able to survive. The Shengjing sect had been overbearing for a long time. Although they were not lenient toward their own scum, They were even more intolerant of other sects' offense. Therefore, although Taoist Master Jifeng's anger was boundless, his heart had gradually calmed down. Good. Since you're so rude and unreasonable, then our Xingjing sect, just as his voice fell, he suddenly heard a woman's voice from outside the door. Interesting, how old are you? Yet you're always talking about our Xingjing sect. You've been cultivating for so long. Haven't you learned to speak with your own identity? Accompanied by a mocking laughter, a woman in white riding on an emerald-green sword light flew into the spirit sword hall. Heh, senior brothers and junior sisters, just now, your speech, we accidentally heard it. Alas, thank you for your trust, especially senior brother Fong He. I can see that it's really difficult for you to speak against your conscience. But why should our spirit sword sect, for such a trivial matter, go against the Xingjing sect? With that, the woman turned to look at Taoist Master Jifeng. I say, do you really want to hide behind the sect's shell for the rest of your life? Now that this mess is caused by the two of us, let's settle it. No need to implicate the sect. Then, the woman's emerald green bamboo sword light flashed, pointing straight at Jifeng. You and I, one-on-one. Winner takes all, loser kneel down. Do you dare or not? Being pointed at by the woman's emerald green bamboo sword light, coupled with that contemptuous smile, Jifeng's jade mansion, which he had suppressed with great difficulty, once again surged up. Moreover, his reason told him that this seemed to be a straightforward solution. He didn't need to think about how to fight against the high-level elders of the sect, nor did he need to think about how to suppress the Lingjian school's counterattack. As long as he won against this woman, all the problems would be solved. In fact, this was also a commonly used method in the immortal cultivation world. When wrangling couldn't be cleared, then use fists to reason. In the end, this was the immutable truth of the immortal cultivation world. The so-called Wanxian League was nothing more than the largest rogue organization in the 9 regions. Weren't the 5 uniques of the Wanxian League often called the 5 big rogues? And the winner-take-all duel proposed by Wang Wu was the product of such a big environment. When the two sides of the dispute didn't want to waste more energy on wrangling, then they would use a duel. The winner takes all. Even if there was no reason, it would still be reasonable. The loser could only swallow his grievances. Of course, this kind of duel must be agreed by both sides and be bound by the big heart demon oath to ensure the basic rules and order. Otherwise, wouldn't the dignified cultivators of the Wanxian League be no different from the savages in the savage land? Moreover, that 5th elder was only at the peak of King Pill stage. Although he wasn't good at fighting, his cultivation base was at the 4th stage of Yuanying stage. Moreover, he also cultivated a high-rank cultivation method and possessed a spiritual treasure. Even 10 peak King Pill stage cultivators could easily deal with him. He wasn't a small fry Yuanying stage cultivator from an ordinary sect. It was basically impossible for a cultivator from one of the 5 uniques to challenge him. Previously in the White Moon Country, he and Wang Wu exchanged 2 moves. Although the opposite party was extremely slippery and quickly escaped, in just 2 moves, he had already gained the upper hand, forcing the opposite party to defend herself. Therefore, Taoist Master Jifeng didn't understand where that woman's arrogance came from. Could it be that she wanted to rely on the geographical advantage of the Lingjian school to secretly play some tricks? During the duel, there was the big heart demon oath. Casually using external forces to break the rules would only make one's death more miserable. Otherwise, it would be difficult for the immortal cultivation world to have such a set of rules. Even if he wasn't proficient in fighting as a scholar, he was extremely proficient in these rules. With his cultivation base at the 4th stage of Yuanying stage, even deity stage Taoist Master Feng Yin wouldn't be able to interfere with his duel with Wang Wu. For a time, Taoist Master Jifeng had too many reasons to accept Wang Wu's challenge. However, his more than 400 years of lifespan made him especially cautious. No one would court their own death like this. There must be a trap. Especially that Wang Wu, who was crafty and cunning. Although his odds of winning were extremely high, there was no need for him to take such a risk. Thinking of this, Taoist Master Jifeng couldn't help but hesitate. All of this was seen by the 5th elder, who suddenly laughed. Oh, student Jifeng, are you afraid? I, an insignificant, ant-like king pill, challenged you, an unreachable Yuanying stage old monster, and now you're afraid? The fifth elder said, and then helplessly sighed. It seems that Taoist Master King Pill can no longer satisfy you. However, considering your cowardly nature, if it was a Shudan or Foundation Establishment cultivator, you probably wouldn't dare to fight. But this is easy to deal with. My Lingjian school doesn't have anything else, but rookies are everywhere. I won't choose anyone else. I'll call my good-for-nothing disciple to play with you. Rest assured, he has just crossed the threshold of Qi cultivating stage and hasn't even begun to practice formal spells. Moreover, his aptitude is stupid, and his vegetable garden is a complete mess. Wang Lu, come in. Then, a youth wearing a red and white robe came in. It was Wang Lu, who had a tacit understanding with his master. Seeing Wang Lu come in, the fifth elder patted him on the shoulder, pointed at the unusually ugly Taoist Master Jifeng, and said, "You see that old coward over there? He was shocked by Master's King Pill cultivation and doesn't dare to fight with Master alone. It just so happens that your cultivation level is low and your aptitude is dull, so you can represent Master and exchange a few moves with him. Remember to be lenient, good or bad. He's lived for more than 400 years, so he still has a thick face." Wang Lu suddenly understood and nodded his head. His expression was as if he was asking for something, which complimented his master. Even though Taoist Master Jifeng was a Yuanying stage cultivator and was naturally cautious, he was still angered by this clumsy and deliberate performance. However, before he could say anything, Wang Lu's words made him so angry that he almost fainted. "Master, although you are gentle and considerate and can be said to be a role model for women, you still don't understand the psychology of cowards. If you let me, a Qi cultivating stage expert, fight with him, he would be scared to the point of peeing in his pants. That would make him lose his face." Wang Wu, of course, didn't really expect Wang Lu, who had only cultivated for more than 2 years, to fight with a Yuanying stage old monster. Hearing Wang Lu's words, she very cooperatively nodded her head. "Good, good. You have a meticulous mind that even Master can't compare to. So, in your opinion, who should we let him fight? If a Qi cultivating stage cultivator can't satisfy him, do you want to find a Mortal Worlds martial artist?" Wang Lu waved his hand. A Mortal Worlds martial artist is not inferior to a Qi cultivating stage cultivator. They are also very good at fighting. Although that old thing from Shengjing sect has no balls, he still has a brain, so he certainly won't agree. Wang Wu pretended to be surprised. "If a Mortal Worlds martial artist can't do it, then what should we do?" Wang Lu sneered. "Isn't that simple? Big Yellow, come in." Woof. Hearing Wang Lu's call, the Ashy River dog Hachi-Chi ran in from outside the door and excitedly looked at Wang Lu. Out of nowhere, Wang Lu took out a bone and threw it to it, and then pointed at Taoist Master Jifeng. "In a moment, you go fight with him. Remember to be lenient." Woof. In a split second, Taoist Master Jifeng's eyes turned blood red. His supreme Tao heart was unable to suppress his boiling anger. You're courting death. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.